The moment the cameras clicked, Evelyn Carter knew her carefully constructed lie was about to destroy the only real thing she'd felt in years. Standing on that snowy Aspen street, watching Nathan's face shift from confusion to recognition to something far worse than anger, she understood that hiding behind a fake name hadn't protected her heart. It had only delayed the breaking of it. Now the man she loved was walking away, and the little girl who called her Miss Ellie was about to learn that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones wearing the best masks. If you want to see whether love built on a lie can ever become something true, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The restaurant was called The Humble Spoon, which Evelyn thought was either charmingly ironic or desperately on the nose, depending on how the next hour went. She'd chosen it specifically because no one from her world would be caught dead here. Not with the chipped mugs and the laminated menus and the waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Perfect anonymity. Perfect test conditions. She checked her phone. 8:47 a.m. He was late. Evelyn. Ellie, she reminded herself, Ellie for today, wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and watched the door. This was the fourth blind date in as many months, all arranged through a friend of someone who absolutely didn't know who she really was. The system worked because Evelyn made it work. New name, vague job description, clothes from Target, instead of the boutiques on East Hyman. She'd learned to smooth out her vowels, to talk about rent and grocery prices like they actually affected her budget, to be convincingly unremarkable. The first three men had failed spectacularly. One had spent 20 minutes explaining cryptocurrency. Another had asked if she'd ever considered modeling, then looked disappointed when she said no. The third had been perfectly nice until he'd tried to split the check down to the penny, including tax. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for honesty. For someone who would treat Ellie the office worker exactly the same way they'd treat Evelyn Carter, CEO of Tech North Solutions, if they'd known. The difference in those two treatments, that gap, told her everything she needed to know about a man's character. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, and with it, a man in a canvas jacket with motor oil still visible on his sleeve, despite what had clearly been a hasty scrubbing. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that needed a cut and eyes that were doing a quick scan of the restaurant with something close to panic. Their eyes met. He stopped. "Ellie?" he said, and even from across the room she could hear he was out of breath. She raised her hand slightly. He crossed to her table in 4 long strides, and the first thing he said was, "I'm so sorry." Not an excuse, not a joke. An apology, immediate and direct. "I'm Nathan," he continued, still standing because he hadn't caught his breath enough to sit. "I know I'm late. I'm really sorry. My daughter's reading program starts at 8:30, and the teacher caught me at the door to talk about Sophie's progress, which is great. She's doing great. But I didn't want to be rude and cut her off. And then traffic on Main was backed up because of some fender bender near the roundabout. And I just..." He stopped, seemed to realize he was rambling, and pulled out the chair across from her. "I'm sorry. That's not how I wanted to start this." Evelyn found herself smiling before she could think better of it. "It's fine. Sit down before you pass out." He sat. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting at engine parts in dim garage light. His hands were clean but permanently stained in the creases. Mechanic's hands. Real work. He wasn't wearing cologne, just the faint smell of industrial soap and winter air. "Your daughter," Evelyn said. "Sophie. How old?" 6. The panic in Nathan's face softened into something else entirely. 6 going on 30, according to her teacher. She's in this reading acceleration program at the elementary school, Tuesday and Thursday mornings, plus Saturdays. I'm usually not late for anything, I swear, but she wanted to wear her purple dress today, and I couldn't find the tights that matched, so we had this whole negotiation about whether pink tights were acceptable with a purple dress. He stopped again, and this time he actually looked embarrassed. "Sorry," he said. "I'm doing it again, talking too much. My sister says I do that when I'm nervous." "Are you nervous?" Evelyn asked. "Terrified," Nathan said, and the honesty of it hit her somewhere behind her ribs. The waitress appeared, looking no happier than before. Nathan ordered coffee and the breakfast special without looking at the menu. Evelyn asked for a refill. When the waitress left, Nathan leaned back in his chair and seemed to actually see Evelyn for the first time. So, he said. Ellie, my friend Marco said you work in an office. Admin stuff? This was the part she'd practiced. Sort of. I do project coordination for a tech company. Lots of scheduling, keeping different teams on track, making sure nothing falls through the cracks. All technically true. She just left out the part where she owned the company and had 240 employees. That sounds stressful, Nathan said. Sometimes. What about you? Mechanic? Yeah, I've got a shop on the east side, Cole's Auto Repair. Opened it about 4 years ago. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug when it arrived, like he needed something to hold. It's just me and one part-time guy, so I'm there most days from 7 to 6. Sometimes later if we get backed up. That's a long day. Has to be. It's just me and Sophie, so... He shrugged, like the rest of the sentence was obvious. Single father, small business owner. The math wasn't hard. Evelyn had read the brief bio Marco had sent her. Widower. Wife died in a car accident 3 years ago, raising Sophie alone. No family in Aspen except a sister who worked odd hours as an ER nurse. The information had been clinical when she'd first seen it. Now, watching Nathan's hands curve around that cheap ceramic mug, it felt like something else, like weight. That must be hard, she said quietly. Nathan's jaw tightened just slightly. We manage. He changed the subject so smoothly she almost missed it. Asked her about Aspen, how long she'd been here, whether she skied. She told him 3 years, and not really, which was a lie on both counts. She'd been here 8 years and had a place in Snowmass. But he nodded like it made perfect sense. The food came. They ate. The conversation found an easy rhythm that surprised her. Nathan talked about Sophie's obsession with dinosaurs and her complete inability to whisper in public places. Evelyn found herself telling a story about a disastrous office Christmas party, changing just enough details to keep Ellie's cover intact. He laughed at the right parts. Didn't interrupt. Didn't check his phone. An hour passed. Then another. The restaurant started to fill with the late morning crowd, and the waitress began giving them looks that suggested they should either order more or leave. Nathan caught the hint first. I should probably go, he said, but he didn't move to stand up. I've got a Subaru coming in at noon that's going to be a nightmare. Timing belt and probably a head gasket, but this was... He stopped and something vulnerable crossed his face. This was really nice. It was, Evelyn said, and meant it. They split the check. Nathan left a $20 tip on a $30 bill, which the waitress definitely didn't deserve, but which he left anyway. Outside, the sky had gone gray with the promise of snow. Nathan pulled his jacket tighter. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Would you want to do this again? Maybe next Sunday, if you're free. Evelyn knew she should say no. The test was done. He'd passed, shown up late for a legitimate reason, apologized sincerely, talked about his daughter with obvious love, treated the waitress with basic decency, didn't try to impress her with money or status because he thought she didn't have any. He was exactly the kind of man she'd been looking for, someone whose character didn't change based on who he thought she was. She should say no, thank him for his time, and disappear back into her real life. I'd like that, she heard herself say instead. Nathan's whole face changed. The smile was unguarded, genuine, the kind of expression she hadn't seen directed at her in longer than she could remember. Great, he said. Yeah, great. They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to leave. Then Nathan's phone buzzed. He checked it, and the smile shifted into something softer. Sophie E., he explained. My sister just picked her up from the reading program. She wants to know if I remembered to ask about the purple tights situation. Did you? I did. The teacher said purple dress, pink tights, totally acceptable in her professional opinion. He typed something back one-handed, then looked up. I should go get her, but next Sunday? Same place, same time? I'll be here. He started to walk away, then turned back. Hey, Ellie? Yeah? Thanks for not making me feel like an idiot for being late. Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing around the corner toward wherever he'd parked. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk and watched him go, feeling something unfamiliar uncurling in her chest. She told herself it was just satisfaction. The test had worked. She'd found someone decent. But walking back to where she'd parked her car, the Toyota Camry she kept specifically for these occasions, not the Tesla she actually drove, Evelyn had to admit the truth. The test was supposed to prove that good men existed who would value her for something other than her money. It was never supposed to prove that she might actually fall for one of them. Marseille. The second Sunday, it snowed. Evelyn arrived early, back in her Ellie clothes, jeans from Old Navy, boots from Target, a sweater that had cost $30 instead of $300. She'd spent 40 minutes that morning practicing looking unremarkable in the mirror, which was possibly the most ridiculous thing she'd done all year, and she'd once sat through a 4-hour board meeting about font choices. Nathan was on time. He came through the door at exactly 8:30 with snow in his hair and that same canvas jacket, and when he spotted her, his face did that thing again. That open, uncomplicated happiness. "You came back," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I don't know. Maybe." He shrugged out of his jacket. "In my experience, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is." Evelyn's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm not too good to be true. I'm just a person who showed up for breakfast." "Fair enough." Nathan signaled the waitress, a different one this time, younger, with purple streaks in her hair. "So, how was your week?" It was such a simple question, a normal question, the kind of thing people asked each other all the time. But Evelyn had to mentally sort through the real answer: budget meeting, investor call, keynote speech at a tech conference in Denver, and find the Ellie version. "Busy," she said. "We're rolling out a new project at work, so there's a lot of coordination, a lot of late nights making sure everyone's on the same page." "Also true, just incomplete." "Sounds familiar," Nathan said. "I had a guy bring in a '68 Mustang this week. Beautiful car, absolute disaster under the hood. Spent 3 days just getting it to the point where I could actually start the real work. Sometimes I think people hold on to things way past when they should just let them go." "Why do they?" "Attachment, I guess. They remember what it used to be and they can't see what it is now." He paused. "Or maybe they just don't want to admit they made a bad investment." The waitress came. They ordered. Nathan asked for the breakfast special again. Evelyn switched to the pancakes. When they were alone, Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask you something personal?" "How personal?" "Have you dated much since moving to Aspen?" Evelyn chose her words carefully. "Not really. It's hard to meet people. And when I do meet someone, it's—" She stopped, trying to figure out how much truth she could give without giving everything. "It's hard to know if they're interested in me or interested in what they think I can do for them." Nathan nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." "Do you?" "Different reasons, but yeah." He traced the rim of his coffee cup with one finger. "After Sarah died, that's Sophie's mom, everyone wanted to help. Which was great, don't get me wrong. But some people, they weren't helping because they cared about me or Sophie. They were helping because it made them feel good about themselves. Like we were this tragedy they could fix. That must have been awful." "It was complicated." Nathan met her eyes. The grief was hard enough. Adding other people's expectations to it made it harder. Eventually, I just stopped trying to figure out who meant it and who didn't. Easier to keep everyone at a distance. "But you're here," Evelyn pointed out. "So are you." The food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, big fat flakes that stuck to the window and obscured the street. Evelyn watched Nathan cut his eggs with the side of his fork, precise, economical movements, and wondered what he'd think if he knew the truth, if he'd be angry at the deception, if he'd assume the worst, that she'd been playing him for a fool, if he'd still look at her the way he was looking at her right now. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked. Evelyn blinked. "Nothing." "You had this look, like you were solving a really complicated math problem in your head." "Just work stuff, Sean," she lied. "Sorry, I'm here. I'm paying attention." "You don't have to apologize." Nathan set down his fork. "I zone out all the time. Sophie calls it my car brain. Like I'm running through repair steps instead of listening to her talk about whatever dinosaur drama is happening at school. Dinosaur drama? Oh, it's intense. Apparently there's this whole hierarchy. T-Rex thinks he's in charge, but Triceratops has the real power because she controls access to the good climbing tree. Nathan's mouth twitched into a smile. I'm not entirely sure we're still talking about dinosaurs at this point. I think it might be code for actual kids. Evelyn laughed, surprised by how genuine it felt. She sounds amazing. She is. Nathan's expression shifted into something softer, more serious. She's the best thing I've ever done. Only good thing to come out of... He stopped, looked down at his plate. Sorry, that's too heavy for a second date. It's not a date, Evelyn said automatically, then regretted it when she saw Nathan's face. Right, he said. Yeah, just breakfast. I didn't mean... She stopped, frustrated with herself. This was exactly why she didn't do this, why she kept people at arm's length and tested them from behind a false name. The moment things got real, she panicked. I'm not good at this. At what? Letting people in. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Me neither. They sat there in the booth, snow falling outside, half-eaten breakfast between them, and Evelyn felt the weight of all the things she wasn't saying pressing down on her chest. She wanted to tell him, wanted to say, My name isn't Ellie. I'm not barely scraping by. I own a company, and I came here in disguise because I needed to know if someone could care about me without wanting something from me first. But if she told him that, this would end, and she wasn't ready for it to end. Sophie's reading program, she said instead, changing the subject with all the grace of a freight train. You mentioned it last week. Is that something she asked to do, or... Nathan let her redirect. Spent the next 20 minutes talking about Sophie's love of books, her frustration with being the youngest in her class, her inexplicable fear of automatic hand dryers in public bathrooms. Evelyn listened and asked questions and let herself pretend just for a little while that this was her real life, that she was Ellie and Nathan was a mechanic she'd met through a friend, and nothing about this was built on sand. When they finally left the restaurant, it was almost noon. The snow had let up, but the sidewalk was slick. Nathan walked her to her car, the Camry, parked 2 blocks away, and stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. Same time next week? He asked. I'll be here. Good. He hesitated, then said, Would you want to maybe do something different? Not breakfast at the Humble Spoon, something else. Evelyn's pulse kicked up. Like what? There's this place Sophie and I go sometimes, the Winter Market on East Hopkins. It's kind of touristy, but they have good coffee and Sophie likes to look at the handmade stuff. If you wanted to come with us, He stopped, reading her expression. Or not, if that's too much. I don't want to pressure you. Every instinct Evelyn had was screaming at her to say no. Meeting Sophie meant crossing a line, meant this stopped being a controlled test and became something messier, something real. Once she met his daughter, she couldn't just disappear, couldn't ghost him when the experiment was done. Okay, she said. Nathan's eyebrows went up. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. He was smiling again, that unguarded smile that made something warm unfold in her chest. Sunday afternoon then, around 2? I'll text you the address. Sounds good. He started to leave, then turned back. Hey, Ellie. Yeah? I'm glad you're bad at letting people in. Makes me feel less weird about it. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the snow-dusted crowd on Main Street. Evelyn stood next to her car and felt the full weight of what she'd just agreed to. She was going to meet Sophie, was going to step further into Nathan's real life while he knew nothing real about hers. She should cancel, should text him some excuse, end this before it got more complicated. But when she got home, to her actual home, the renovated Victorian in the West End with heated floors and mountain views, she didn't cancel. She sat in her living room with a glass of wine she didn't drink and her phone in her hand, and she thought about the way Nathan's face had changed when he talked about his daughter. She thought about the last time anyone had looked at her like she was just a person, not a portfolio or a connection or a means to an end. She thought about how long it had been since she'd felt anything close to peace. And then she texted Marco. I need to know everything about Nathan Cole. Not the basics. Everything. The response came back in under a minute. Why? You actually like this one? Evelyn stared at the message. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, she typed, "Just send me what you have." Because the truth, the part she couldn't say out loud even to herself, was that she didn't just like Nathan Cole. She was starting to need him. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The report from Marco arrived at 11 p.m. that same night. 32 pages of background that Evelyn told herself she needed for safety reasons, but knew was really just fear dressed up as caution. She read it twice, sitting at her kitchen island with her laptop open and that same glass of wine still untouched beside her. Nathan Cole, 34. Born in Boulder, moved to Aspen 8 years ago when his wife Sarah got a job teaching at the elementary school. Opened Cole's Auto Repair 4 years back with a small business loan and a decade of experience from working at other people's shops. Sarah died in a winter accident on Independence Pass. Black ice, no other cars involved, nothing anyone could have prevented or predicted. Sophie had been 3. Nathan's sister Rachel moved to Aspen 6 months later to help, worked night shifts at Aspen Valley Hospital so she could watch Sophie during the day when Nathan was at the shop. No debt beyond the business loan, which he was paying down ahead of schedule. No criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. Volunteered at Sophie's school twice a month for career day presentations about basic car maintenance. Donated repair services to a local nonprofit that helped low-income families keep their vehicles running. The information should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Evelyn's chest feel tight. Because Nathan wasn't just passing her test. He was the kind of person who wouldn't need to take one in the first place, and the kind of person who did the right thing when no one was watching, who helped people who couldn't help him back, who showed up for his daughter and his community, and apparently everyone except himself. And she was lying to him. Evelyn closed the laptop and looked out at the dark shapes of the mountains against the darker sky. She could still back out. Could text Nathan tomorrow and say she'd thought about it, and this wasn't a good idea, meeting his daughter, getting more involved. He'd be disappointed, but he'd understand. She could ghost him cleanly, go back to her real life, chalk this up as a successful experiment that had simply run its course. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. "Sophie wants to know if you like dinosaurs or if you're a wrong person." Before Evelyn could figure out how to respond to that, another message came through. Her words, "Not mine." Apparently there are 2 types of people in the world. Evelyn found herself smiling despite everything. She typed back, "I'm pro-dinosaur. Does that pass the test?" The response was immediate. "You're in. She's already planning which stalls to show you at the market. Fair warning, there's a guy who sells dinosaur cookies and she has no concept of budget constraints. I'll bring cash." "You don't have to do that. I want to." Evelyn hit send before she could second guess it, then added, "See you Sunday." 3 dots appeared, hung there for a long moment, then resolved into, "Can't wait." Evelyn set the phone down and pressed both hands against her face. This was a mistake. A massive, complicated mistake that was going to blow up in her face. She knew that, had known it from the moment she'd said yes to a second breakfast, and definitely by the time she'd agreed to meet Sophie. But she picked up her phone anyway and added the winter market to her calendar, and when she finally went to bed that night, she dreamed about a little girl in a purple dress asking her questions about velociraptors that she absolutely would not know how to answer. Sunday afternoon came too fast and not fast enough. Evelyn changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans and a sweater that looked casual but had actually cost $200, which she justified by telling herself it was on brand for Ellie to have 1 or 2 nicer pieces mixed in with the Target basics. She left her hair down, minimal makeup, no jewelry except the cheap watch she'd bought specifically for these occasions. The winter market was exactly as touristy as Nathan had warned. White tents set up in neat rows, vendors selling everything from hand-knit scarves to organic dog treats to metalwork sculptures that cost more than most people's rent. The crowd was thick despite the cold. Locals mixed with weekend visitors, everyone bundled up and clutching paper cups of hot cider or coffee. Evelyn spotted Nathan before he saw her. He was standing near the entrance, scanning the crowd, and next to him was a little girl in a puffy pink coat and purple boots, bouncing on her toes like standing still was physically painful. Sophie. Had to be Sophie. Evelyn's stomach did something complicated. She'd seen pictures in Marco's report, But pictures didn't capture the way Sophie grabbed Nathan's hand and pointed at something across the market, her whole body radiating excitement. Didn't capture the way Nathan bent down to hear whatever she was saying, his expression patient and focused despite the noise around them. Then Sophie spotted Evelyn. She went still for half a second, then tugged hard on Nathan's sleeve. Nathan looked up, saw Evelyn, smiled. She made herself walk forward instead of running in the opposite direction. "Ellie," Nathan said when she reached them, and there was something in his voice that made her name sound important. "This is Sophie. Sophie, this is Miss Ellie." Sophie looked up at Evelyn with huge brown eyes and said, "Do you actually like dinosaurs, or were you just saying that to be nice?" "Sophie," Nathan said, but Evelyn held up a hand. "Actual question deserves an actual answer," she said, crouching down so she was closer to Sophie's eye level. "I think dinosaurs are cool, but I don't know very much about them, so I might need you to teach me." Sophie's face transformed. "I can do that. I know everything. Well, not everything, because some dinosaurs we only have like 3 bones from, so nobody knows everything about those. But I know a lot. Did you know that velociraptors were actually only about this big?" "Baba, she held her hands about 2 feet apart. "Not like in the movies. The movies are wrong." "The movies are wrong about a lot of things," Evelyn agreed. "That's what I keep telling Dad, but he says we have to suspend our disbelief." Sophie pronounced the phrase carefully, like she'd been practicing. "What does that mean?" "It means your dad is trying to enjoy Jurassic Park without you pointing out all the scientific inaccuracies," Nathan said. He looked at Evelyn over Sophie's head, something apologetic and amused in his expression. "Fair warning, you've opened a floodgate." "I can handle it," Evelyn said, and meant it. They walked through the market, Sophie leading the way with the confidence of a tiny tour guide who knew exactly where she was going. She stopped at a tent selling hand-carved wooden animals, spent 10 minutes examining a Triceratops figurine and explaining to Evelyn why it was anatomically better than most toy versions. Moved on to a booth with vintage books, pulled out a field guide to prehistoric creatures, and looked up at Nathan with so much hope that he caved before she even asked the question. "How much, he asked the vendor. 15. Nathan pulled out his wallet. Sophie clutched the book like it was made of gold. Evelyn watched the transaction and thought about the business loan Nathan was paying off ahead of schedule, the long hours at the shop, the careful budgeting that probably went into every purchase. $15 wasn't nothing to him. But Sophie wanted the book, so he bought it. "You didn't have to do that," Evelyn said quietly, while Sophie was distracted by a display of geodes. "Yeah, I did," Nathan said. "She's been good all week, and it's a book. I'll always buy her books." They moved deeper into the market. Sophie found the dinosaur cookie stand, and Nathan bought her 2, a T-Rex and a Stegosaurus, then looked at Evelyn with a question in his eyes. She shook her head, not hungry, and watched Sophie devour the T-Rex with prehistoric efficiency while explaining that real T-Rexes probably couldn't run very fast because of their body weight ratio. "Is she always like this?" Evelyn asked. "Pretty much, Nathan said. "Drives her teacher crazy sometimes. She has a hard time turning off the information stream, but her reading scores are off the charts, so we're calling it a win." Sophie finished the T-Rex and immediately started on the Stegosaurus, trailing behind them as they walked. Nathan slowed his pace to match hers without seeming to think about it, and Evelyn found herself doing the same. They passed a tent selling hot cider, and Nathan bought 3 cups without asking, just handed one to Evelyn and one to Sophie and kept walking. "Thank you," Evelyn said. "It's cold," seemed obvious. It was such a small thing, such a normal, considerate gesture. But Evelyn couldn't remember the last time someone had anticipated what she might need and just done it, no expectation of praise or reciprocation. In her world, every gift came with strings. Every kindness had a price tag that would come due eventually. She sipped the cider and tried not to think about how much she wanted this to be real. Sophie found another bookstall and disappeared into it like a heat-seeking missile. Nathan leaned against the tent pole and watched her with an expression that was equal parts pride and exhaustion. "She's a lot," he said. "I know that. If you need to tap out, I won't be offended." "I'm not going anywhere," Evelyn said, and then immediately wondered why she'd phrased it like that, like a promise instead of a statement about the next hour. Nathan looked at her. Good. They stood there in the cold with people streaming past them and Sophie's voice floating out from the tent. Dad, they have a book about pterosaurs and it has illustrations. And Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and reckless and entirely her own fault. She was falling for this. Not just Nathan, though that was part of it, but this whole life. The casual Sunday afternoon at a tourist market, the little girl who explained dinosaurs. Like other kids explained their favorite TV shows, the man who bought books he probably couldn't afford because reading mattered. The simplicity of it. The realness. Sophie emerged with another book. Nathan took one look at the price tag and winced. That's a maybe, he told Sophie. Let me think about it. Sophie's face fell, but she nodded and put the book back without argument. Good kid, well raised. Evelyn watched Nathan crouch down and say something to Sophie too quietly for her to hear, watched Sophie nod again and hug him hard around the neck. When Nathan stood up, Evelyn said, I could... No, Nathan said, gentle but firm. Thanks, but no. We're fine. He wasn't angry, wasn't offended, just clear about the boundary, and Evelyn respected that even as it made her chest ache. Because, of course, he wouldn't take money from Ellie, the office worker, who he thought was barely scraping by herself. And she couldn't offer more without explaining why she had more to offer. They left the bookstall and wandered toward the food vendors. Sophie ran ahead to look at a display of blown glass ornaments, and Nathan moved closer to Evelyn. Sorry, he said. I know that was awkward. It wasn't. You were trying to be nice. I shouldn't have shut you down like that. Nathan. Evelyn stopped walking, waited for him to look at her. You set a boundary. That's not something you need to apologize for. He studied her face for a moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Most people don't see it that way. Most people are wrong. Nathan's mouth quirked into almost a smile. You're kind of intense, you know that? I've been told. I like it, he said, and then Sophie was back, dragging them toward a tent that sold fresh pretzels, and the moment passed. They spent another hour at the market. Sophie collected pamphlets from every vendor like she was documenting an expedition. Nathan bought them all pretzels and didn't complain when Sophie decided she didn't actually want hers and ate half of his instead. Evelyn found herself relaxing in increments, the careful performance of being Ellie becoming less performance and more just existing in the moment. When Sophie announced she needed a bathroom, Nathan pointed her toward the public facilities near the parking lot and told her he'd wait right there. The second Sophie was out of earshot, he turned to Evelyn. Can I ask you something? Sure. What are we doing? Evelyn's heart kicked hard against her ribs. What do you mean? This. Nathan gestured vaguely at the space between them. The breakfast, now this. I like you. I think that's obvious, and I think maybe you like me too. But you keep pulling back every time things start to feel real, and I can't figure out if that's because you're not interested or because you're scared. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it. Every instinct screamed at her to deflect, to change the subject, to protect herself. But Nathan was looking at her with so much honesty in his face that lying felt physically impossible. I'm scared, she said. Of what? Of this not being what I think it is. The truth came out before she could stop it. Of getting attached and then finding out I was wrong about you. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You weren't wrong about me. I'm exactly who you think I am. Just a guy who fixes cars and tries to raise his kid right and doesn't have much else to offer. That's not... Evelyn stopped, frustrated. You have plenty to offer. Do I? Nathan's voice was quiet. Because from where I'm standing, you're smart and successful and put together, and I'm a single dad who smells like motor oil most of the time and can't afford to buy his kid every book she wants. I keep waiting for you to figure out you can do better. The irony of it hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Here was Nathan, worried he wasn't good enough for Ellie the office worker, while the real Evelyn owned a company and could buy Sophie an entire library without blinking. The lies were piling up so high she couldn't see over them anymore. You're not, she started, but Sophie was back, running toward them with her coat flapping open. There's a hot chocolate stand, Chica. she announced. "Can we get hot chocolate?" Nathan looked at Evelyn, an apology in his eyes for the interrupted conversation, but Evelyn just smiled and said, "Lead the way." They got hot chocolate. Sophie burned her tongue and complained loudly, but kept drinking it anyway. Nathan suggested they head out before the parking lot got too crazy, and they walked back toward the cars in a loose group, Sophie skipping ahead and then circling back like a dog on a very long leash. When they reached the lot, Nathan said, "Where are you parked?" "Other side," Evelyn said, gesturing vaguely. "I can walk. It's fine. I'll walk with you." "You don't have to." "I want to." Nathan looked down at Sophie. "You good to walk a little more?" "Can I tell Miss Ellie about the Pachycephalosaurus?" "If she says yes." Evelyn nodded, and Sophie launched into an explanation about dome-headed dinosaurs that lasted the entire walk to Evelyn's car. When they reached the Camry, Sophie finally paused for breath, and Nathan said, "Say thank you to Miss Ellie for spending the afternoon with us." "Thank you," Sophie said dutifully. Then, with more enthusiasm, "Can you come over for dinner sometime?" Evelyn's brain short-circuited. Nathan looked mortified. "Sophie, you can't just invite people. Why not?" Sophie looked genuinely confused. "You said we could have people over if we asked first. I meant ask me first, not ask them first." "Oh." Sophie thought about this. "Can Miss Ellie come over for dinner?" Nathan looked at Evelyn with an expression that clearly said, "I'm so sorry, and you don't have to say yes." But Evelyn was already nodding before she could think better of it. "I'd like that," she said. Sophie cheered. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, looking like he couldn't decide if he was pleased or panicked. "Okay," he said. "Okay. How about next Saturday? Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and probably dinosaur documentaries." "Sounds perfect," Evelyn said, and watched something in Nathan's face relax. They said goodbye. Sophie hugged Evelyn's legs with surprising force, and Nathan gave her a smile that made her chest feel warm and tight at the same time. Evelyn got in her car and watched them walk back across the parking lot in her rear-view mirror, Sophie holding Nathan's hand and talking non-stop, Nathan nodding along like every word was important. When they were out of sight, Evelyn put her forehead against the steering wheel and tried to breathe through the panic. She'd just agreed to go to Nathan's house, to his actual home, where all the details of his real life would be on display, where she'd have to lie more smoothly, more carefully, with Sophie watching and asking questions that 6-year-olds asked without any filter. This was spiraling, getting too big, too complicated. She needed to end it before someone got hurt. But even as she thought it, Evelyn knew she wasn't going to, couldn't, because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, being Ellie had stopped feeling like a performance and started feeling like the only time she was actually herself. The week that followed was a study in compartmentalization. Monday through Friday, Evelyn was herself. Board meetings, conference calls, a keynote speech at a tech startup incubator where she talked about scaling businesses and managing growth. She wore her power suits and her expensive heels and spoke in the clipped, confident tones that made venture capitalists pay attention. She was good at it, better than good. TechNorth Solutions had tripled its revenue in 3 years under her leadership, and she had the offers to prove it. Buyout proposals she'd turned down, partnership requests she'd declined, headhunters who called monthly with opportunities she didn't need. But at night, alone in her house with the mountain views and the heated floors, she thought about Saturday, ran through scenarios in her head, worried about which version of herself would show up at Nathan's door. On Friday, her assistant knocked on her office door with an odd expression. "There's someone here to see you," Maria said. "No appointment, says it's personal." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Who?" "Didn't give a name, just said you'd want to talk to him." Maria lowered her voice. "He looks like he just came from a garage. I can send him away if you want." Nathan. It was Nathan, had to be. Evelyn's first thought was panic. He'd found out, somehow figured it out, come here to confront her. Her second thought was curiosity about what story Maria had told him to explain why Evelyn Carter, CEO, would want to talk to some random mechanic who'd walked in off the street. "Send him in," Evelyn said, already mentally preparing her explanation. But when Maria opened the door, the man who walked through wasn't Nathan. It was someone she'd never seen before. Tall, mid-50s, expensive suit that didn't quite hide the hardness underneath. He moved like someone who'd spent time enforcing things. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I appreciate you seeing me. I don't think I had much choice." Evelyn stayed behind her desk. "Who are you?" "James Crawford. I'm a private investigator." He set a business card on her desk. "I've been hired to look into Nathan Cole." The bottom dropped out of Evelyn's stomach. She kept her face neutral through years of practice. "And why would that interest me?" "Because you've been seeing him." Crawford pulled out his phone, swiped a few times, then turned it around. Photos. Evelyn and Nathan at the Humble Spoon, at the winter market, walking to her car. The angles were careful, professional. Surveillance photos. "Who hired you?" Evelyn's voice was ice. "I'm not at liberty to say, but my client wanted me to warn you that Mr. Cole isn't what he seems. Meaning he's a single father with financial troubles who's suddenly very interested in a woman he knows nothing about." Crawford pocketed his phone. "My client thinks you should know that his business is underwater. He's 3 months behind on his loan payments. His sister lost her job at the hospital last month. He's desperate." Evelyn's hands were flat on her desk, the only thing keeping her grounded. "Get out!" "Ms. Carter, get out of my office, now!" Crawford held up his hands. "Just doing my job. Thought you'd want to know before you got in any deeper." He headed toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, if he doesn't know who you are yet, he will soon. Men like that always find out. And when he does, you'll wish you'd listened to me." The door closed. Evelyn sat perfectly still, her mind racing. Someone had hired a private investigator. Someone knew she'd been seeing Nathan, which meant someone knew about Ellie, about the disguise, about all of it. Her phone buzzed, a text from Nathan. "Sophie wants to make garlic bread for tomorrow. Is that okay, or are you anti-garlic?" Evelyn stared at the message. Thought about Crawford's words, thought about the photos, the implications, the suggestion that Nathan was playing her the same way she'd been playing him. She should cancel, should listen to the investigator, protect herself, and this before it got worse. But she kept seeing Nathan's face when he'd bought Sophie that dinosaur book. The way he'd set boundaries about the pterosaur guide, the exhaustion under his eyes that spoke to long hours and careful budgeting and doing everything alone. 3 months behind on loan payments. Sister lost her job. Desperate. Evelyn picked up her phone and called Marco. "I need you to verify something," she said when he answered. "Nathan Cole's business. Is he behind on payments?" A pause. "Where did you hear that?" "Just tell me." "Give me 10 minutes. Marco called back in 8. "He's current on everything. Ahead, actually. Made a double payment last month. Why?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "And his sister, Rachel Cole, still employed at Aspen Valley?" "Yeah, just picked up extra shifts. What's going on?" "Nothing," Evelyn said. "Thanks." She hung up and looked at Crawford's business card, still sitting on her desk. Someone had lied, had hired an investigator to feed her false information, to make her doubt Nathan, to drive a wedge between them, which meant someone knew who she really was, and whoever it was wanted her away from Nathan badly enough to fabricate evidence. Evelyn's mind went to the obvious suspects. Preston, her ex, who'd never quite accepted that she'd ended things. A few board members who thought she should focus more on business and less on personal distractions. Competitors who might see her relationship status as leverage. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that someone was watching, and if they knew about Ellie, they could expose her to Nathan at any time. She should tell him first, should come clean, control the narrative, explain before someone else did it for her. Evelyn looked at Nathan's text again, typed out, "Garlic bread sounds perfect. See you tomorrow." Then she deleted it and wrote instead, "Can we talk? It's important." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Everything okay?" No. Nothing was okay. Everything was falling apart. "I need to tell you something," Evelyn typed. "Can you call me?" The phone rang 30 seconds later. Nathan's voice was tight with worry. "What's wrong?" And Evelyn, who had spent 3 weeks carefully constructing a fiction, who had tested Nathan from behind a false name and a manufactured identity, opened her mouth to tell him the truth. "I'm not who you think I am," she said. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "What does that mean?" "It means—" Evelyn stopped, started over. My name isn't Ellie. I don't work in an office doing project coordination. I own a tech company. I'm the CEO. I have money, a lot of it, and I've been lying to you since we met." The silence stretched so long Evelyn thought he might have hung up. Then Nathan said, very quietly, "Why?" "Because I needed to know if someone could care about me without wanting something from me, without seeing dollar signs. I've been hurt before, and I thought—" She stopped, hearing how hollow it sounded. "I thought if I tested you first, I'd be safe." "Tested me." Nathan's voice was flat. "You mean you were running an experiment, and I was the lab rat?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Evelyn? Is that even your real name?" "Yes. Evelyn Carter. I own Tech North Solutions. Everything else I told you was a lie." Nathan made a sound that might have been a laugh but came out broken. "Everything. Not everything. How I felt about you. That was real. Is real. How would I know?" And now there was anger in Nathan's voice, sharp and raw. "How would I know anything about you is real when you've been lying from the start? When you brought my daughter into this, made her care about you, and it was all just some fucked up character test? I never meant to hurt Sophie, but you did. You will. Because she's 6, and she doesn't understand why people pretend to be someone they're not. And now I have to explain to her that Miss Ellie isn't coming to dinner tomorrow because Miss Ellie doesn't exist." Evelyn's chest felt like it was caving in. "Nathan, don't." His voice cracked. "Just don't. I trusted you. I told you things I haven't told anyone. I let you into my life, into Sophie's life, and the whole time you were just collecting data, making sure I passed your test." "You did pass," Evelyn said desperately. "You're exactly who I hoped you'd be. And you're not." Nathan's voice went quiet again, which was somehow worse than the anger. "I thought you were someone who understood what it was like to be scared of getting hurt. Someone who got why I kept people at a distance. But you weren't scared. You were calculating. There's a difference." "I was scared," Evelyn said. "I am scared. That's why I'm telling you now before someone else does. Someone hired a private investigator. They know about us. About Ellie. They're trying to drive us apart. They don't need to try very hard." Nathan's breath hitched. "You already did that yourself." "Please," Evelyn said, "let me explain in person. Let me—" "I can't." Nathan cut her off. "I can't look at you right now and not see every lie you told. Every time I shared something real and you gave me a fiction in return. I need space." "How much space?" "I don't know." A pause. "Maybe forever." The line went dead. Evelyn sat in her office with the phone still pressed to her ear and felt something crack open in her chest. She'd known this could happen, had known from the start that the truth would hurt him. But hearing the pain in Nathan's voice, knowing she'd put it there, was worse than anything she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Told you he'd find out. Crawford." Or whoever had hired him. Evelyn deleted the message and dropped her head into her hands. She'd built her whole life on control. On managing variables, mitigating risks, protecting herself from people who wanted to use her. And in the process, she'd become exactly what she'd feared most. Someone who hurt good people because she couldn't trust them to be good without proof. Nathan was right. She hadn't been scared. She'd been arrogant. Had thought she could test him like a hypothesis, measure his worth against her metrics, and somehow that wouldn't be a betrayal. But it was. It absolutely was. And now she'd lost him. Lost Sophie. Lost the only real thing she'd felt in years because she'd been too afraid to let it be real from the start. Evelyn sat alone in her corner office with its mountain views and its expensive furniture and its complete devastating emptiness, and finally understood what her test had actually measured. Not Nathan's character, but her own capacity to sabotage the things she wanted most. The garlic bread text from Nathan still sat unanswered on her phone. Evelyn looked at it for a long time. Then she typed, "I'm so sorry." She didn't expect a response, didn't get one. Saturday came and went with no dinner, no dinosaur documentaries, no Sophie explaining Pachycephalosaurus anatomy over spaghetti. Evelyn spent the day in her empty house, trying to work and failing, trying not to check her phone and failing at that too. By Sunday, she'd made a decision. She couldn't undo the lies, couldn't go back and be honest from the start. But she could at least make sure Nathan knew the truth about one thing. She hadn't been using him, and whoever was trying to destroy what they had wasn't going to win without a fight, even if that fight was already over before it began. Marco showed up at Evelyn's house Monday morning with coffee and the kind of expression that said he'd already heard everything and had opinions about it. She let him in mostly because she didn't have the energy to argue. "You told him," Marco said, setting the coffee on her kitchen counter. "It wasn't a question. Someone was going to." Evelyn picked up the cup but didn't drink. "Better it came from me." "Was it, though?" Marco leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Because from where I'm sitting, you just blew up something good because you got scared." "I didn't get scared. Someone hired a private investigator. They have photos of us. They were going to expose me anyway." "So you exposed yourself first. Very mature." Evelyn's jaw tightened. What was I supposed to do? Keep lying until he found out from a stranger? Until someone showed him those photos and told him I'd been playing him? "You could have committed to the lie, now," Marco said. "Played it out. Let Ellie be real." "Ellie isn't real. That's the whole problem." "Isn't she?" Marco grabbed his own coffee, took a long drink. "Because from what I saw, Ellie wasn't some character you were performing. She was just you without the armor. And maybe that's what scared you. Not that Nathan would find out you have money. That he'd find out you're actually capable of being happy." The words hit harder than Evelyn wanted to admit. She turned away, looked out the window at the mountains. Snow was coming in, heavy clouds pressing down on the peaks. "He won't answer my calls, she said quietly. "Did you expect him to?" "No, but I thought—" She stopped. "I don't know what I thought." Marco was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You want to know who hired Crawford?" Evelyn turned. "You found out?" "Preston, your ex. Apparently he's been keeping tabs on you since you dumped him. Saw you with Nathan, didn't like it, decided to intervene." Of course. Preston Montgomery, venture capitalist, chronic narcissist, and the reason Evelyn had started testing men in the first place. They'd dated for 8 months before she'd realized he wasn't interested in her so much as the connection she could provide. The minute she'd ended it, he'd tried to convince their mutual contacts that she was unstable, difficult, impossible to work with. It hadn't stuck. Evelyn's reputation was too solid, but it had been ugly. "He fed Crawford false information about Nathan's finances," Evelyn said. "Tried to make me think Nathan was using me. Classic Preston. Can't have the thing himself, so he makes sure nobody else can either." Marco set down his coffee. "You want me to handle him?" "Handle him how? Legal channels, harassment, invasion of privacy. We've got enough to make his life complicated." Evelyn considered it. Preston deserved it. But going after him meant making this whole situation public, and public meant Nathan and Sophie getting dragged into something they didn't ask for. "No," she said. "Let it go." "You're kidding." "I'm not. Preston's not the problem. I am." Evelyn finally took a sip of coffee. It was cold. "I lied to Nathan for weeks. I brought his daughter into it. Preston didn't make me do that. I did that myself." Marco studied her for a long moment. "You really care about this guy." "Doesn't matter now." "It might, if you fight for it." "How?" Evelyn's voice came out sharper than she intended. "He told me he needs space, maybe forever. I can't exactly show up at his shop and demand he forgive me." "No, but you can show him you mean it. That this wasn't just some experiment that went wrong. That you actually—" Marco stopped, seemed to recalibrate. "Look, Nathan's not stupid. He knows you lied. But he also knows how you were with Sophie. How you looked at him when you thought nobody was watching. That wasn't fake. You just need to prove it." "And how do I do that?" "I have no idea. But you're Evelyn Carter. You've built a company from nothing, outmaneuvered investors who thought you were too young to know what you were doing, turned down buyout offers most people would kill for. If you want something, you figure out how to get it." Marco headed for the door, then paused. "Just make sure you actually want it, because if you're doing this to win, to prove something to yourself, then let it go. But if you're doing it because you love him, then stop hiding behind excuses and do the work." He left. Evelyn stood in her empty kitchen and thought about the difference between wanting to win and wanting to be loved. Thought about whether she even knew how to tell them apart anymore. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Board meeting in an hour. Do you need the quarterly reports? Right, Monday. The real world. The life that didn't involve mechanics and dinosaur cookies and little girls in purple boots. Evelyn texted back, send them over. I'll be there. She went to the meeting, gave her presentation, answered questions about revenue projections and market expansion with the same cool competence that had made her untouchable in boardrooms. Nobody mentioned Nathan. Nobody knew about Ellie. In this world, she was still Evelyn Carter, CEO, successful and controlled and completely alone. The meeting ended at noon. Evelyn went back to her office and tried to focus on work. Made it through about 20 minutes before she gave up and pulled up Nathan's shop website instead. Cole's Auto Repair. The site was basic, clearly built from a template, probably by Nathan himself. A few stock photos of cars, a list of services, a contact form. At the bottom, a single line. Family-owned and operated. We treat your car like it's our own. Evelyn clicked through to the reviews. 4.5 stars. Most of the comments mentioned Nathan by name. Honest guy. Didn't try to upsell me on stuff I didn't need. Fixed my transmission for half what the dealer quoted. Great with my kids when I had to bring them along. Even let my son watch him work. One review, dated 2 months ago. My car broke down on Independence Pass in a snowstorm. Nathan came out at 9 p.m. to tow me back to town, didn't charge me extra for the late call, and had me back on the road by morning. This is the kind of person you want on your side. Evelyn read that one twice. Thought about Nathan driving out into a snowstorm to help a stranger. Thought about the care he put into everything he did, from buying Sophie books to making sure Evelyn had hot cider without being asked. Thought about how thoroughly she'd failed to deserve any of it. Her office door opened. Maria stuck her head in, looking uncertain. There's someone here, she said. Another walk-in. Says she knows you. Evelyn's stomach sank. Who? Rachel Cole, Nathan's sister. Evelyn sat very still, running through possibilities. Rachel was here to tell her to stay away from Nathan, or to yell at her for hurting him, or send her in, Evelyn said. Rachel Cole was shorter than Evelyn expected, with the same dark hair as Nathan, but lighter eyes. She was wearing scrubs, must have come straight from the hospital, and she looked tired in the way that suggested she'd been tired for years. Ms. Carter, Rachel said, no handshake offered. Thanks for seeing me. I'm surprised you wanted to see me. Yeah, well, I figured we should talk before this gets any worse. Rachel sat down in the chair across from Evelyn's desk without waiting for an invitation. Nathan told me what happened, about Ellie, about all of it. Evelyn's chest tightened. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. Are you? Rachel's eyes were sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, you played my brother like this was all some kind of game. And now Sophie's asking when Miss Ellie is coming back and Nathan won't tell her the truth because he doesn't want to break her heart more than you already did. Each word landed like a punch. Evelyn made herself take it. You're right, she said. I hurt them, both of them, and I don't have an excuse that makes that okay. Rachel studied her for a long moment. You know what the worst part is? Nathan liked you, really liked you. I haven't seen him look at anyone like that since Sarah died. And Sophie, she doesn't attach to people easy. Too many people came and went after her mom passed. Too many casseroles and sympathy cards from folks who disappeared the minute things got hard. She learned to keep her distance, but she didn't with you. She trusted you. I know. Evelyn's voice cracked despite her best effort to keep it steady. So what I need to understand, Rachel continued, is whether you actually care about them or whether this was just some rich person experiment in slumming it with the working class. The accusation stung because it was exactly what Evelyn had been afraid she was doing. But sitting here, looking at Rachel's exhausted face and thinking about Sophie's dinosaur book and Nathan's careful budgeting, she knew the truth. I care about them, Evelyn said quietly. More than I've cared about anything in a long time. That's why I told Nathan the truth. Because I couldn't keep lying to someone She stopped. Started over. Someone hired a private investigator to follow us, to dig up dirt on Nathan and feed me lies about his finances. I knew if I didn't tell Nathan first, he'd find out from someone else and think even worse of me. Rachel's eyebrows went up. Someone hired an investigator? Who? My ex. He's been watching me since we broke up. Apparently he didn't like seeing me with Nathan. That's messed up. It is, but it's also not the point. Evelyn met Rachel's eyes. The point is, I lied from the beginning. I tested Nathan like he was some kind of experiment, and even if my reasons made sense to me at the time, they don't excuse what I did. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what Nathan told me after Sarah died? He said the hardest part wasn't the grief. It was the way people looked at him. Like he was broken. Like he needed to be fixed. Everyone had advice about how to parent Sophie alone, how to move on, how to get back out there. And none of it helped because none of them actually knew him. They just knew the idea of him, the tragic widower." Evelyn felt something twist in her chest. "He doesn't want to be anyone's project," Rachel continued. "Doesn't want to be saved or studied or managed. He just wants to be seen. Actually seen. And for a minute there, he thought you saw him." "I did see him," Evelyn said. "I do." "Then why the disguise? Why Ellie?" It was the question Evelyn had been asking herself for days. She took a breath. "Because I was tired of being Evelyn Carter," she said. "Tired of people seeing my bank account before they saw me. I wanted someone to care about me without knowing about the money or the company or any of it. I wanted proof that good people existed who wouldn't want something from me. And Nathan was your proof. He was supposed to be. But then I actually met him, and it stopped being about proof. It became about—" Evelyn stopped, trying to find words that didn't sound hollow. "It became about feeling like myself for the first time in years. When I was with Nathan and Sophie, I wasn't the CEO or the tech founder or the person everyone wanted something from. I was just Ellie, and Ellie got to be happy." Rachel's expression softened slightly. "But Ellie's not real." "No, she's not, and that's the problem." Evelyn looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to be Evelyn and be happy. I only know how to be Evelyn and be in control. And the minute I lose control, I panic. So you're telling me you sabotaged this because you were scared. I'm telling you I sabotaged this because I didn't know how to let it be real." Evelyn met Rachel's eyes again. "But I want to learn. If Nathan will let me. If there's any chance at all that he might—" "He's hurt," Rachel interrupted. "Really hurt. The kind of hurt that doesn't go away just because you apologize." "I know. But—" Rachel paused. "He's also still in love with you, which makes him angry because he wants to be over it, and he's not. So if you're serious about this, about making it right, you need to actually do the work, not just show up with an apology and expect him to forgive you because you're sorry." "What kind of work?" "The kind that proves you're not going anywhere. That this isn't just guilt or stubbornness or whatever rich people feel when they don't get what they want. You need to show him and Sophie that you're in this even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Evelyn nodded slowly. "How do I do that when he won't even talk to me?" Rachel stood up. "That's your problem to solve, but if you figure it out, and if you actually mean what you're saying, then maybe you've got a shot. Maybe." She headed for the door, then turned back. "One more thing. Sophie asked me this morning if Miss Ellie stopped liking her, if she did something wrong. So whatever you do, whatever happens with Nathan, you need to make sure Sophie knows this wasn't her fault." The words hit Evelyn like a sledgehammer. "I will. I promise." Rachel left. Evelyn sat alone in her office and felt the full weight of what she'd done. It wasn't just Nathan she'd hurt. It was a 6-year-old girl who'd already lost her mother and learned not to trust people who said they cared. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Nathan. "Can I talk to Sophie? Just for a few minutes. I need her to know she didn't do anything wrong." The response came 5 minutes later. "She's at school. I'll think about it. Not a yes, but not a no either." Evelyn would take it. The next 3 days were the longest of Evelyn's life. She threw herself into work because it was the only thing she knew how to control. Approved budgets, reviewed contracts, sat through meetings where people nodded at everything she said because she was the one signing their paychecks. None of it felt real. None of it mattered. On Wednesday, Nathan finally texted, "Sophie wants to talk to you, tomorrow at 4. I'll put her on the phone, but I'm staying in the room." Evelyn's hands shook when she typed back, "Thank you." Thursday at 4 p.m. Her phone rang. Nathan's number. Evelyn answered on the first ring. Hello? A pause, then a small voice. Miss Ellie? Evelyn's throat closed. Hi, Sophie. Dad said your real name is Evelyn. Is that true? It is. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before. Another pause. Are you still the same person? The question broke something in Evelyn's chest. Yes, I'm still me. I wasn't honest about some things, and that was wrong. Dad says you lied because you were scared. He's right. What were you scared of? Sophie's voice was so earnest, so genuinely confused, like the idea of being scared was something she couldn't quite connect to a grown-up. Evelyn looked out her window at the mountains, tried to find words a 6-year-old would understand. I was scared that if people knew the real me, they wouldn't like me. But I like you, Sophie said. I like you a lot. You're nice, and you listen to my dinosaur facts, and you didn't get mad when I talked too much at the market. I like you too, Sophie, so much, and I'm so sorry I wasn't honest with you. Are you going to go away now? The question came out small and scared, and Evelyn understood with sudden clarity that this wasn't really about her. This was about every other person who'd left after Sophie's mom died, every adult who'd promised to be there and then wasn't. I don't want to go away, Evelyn said carefully, but that's not just up to me. Your dad is really hurt right now, and he gets to decide whether he wants me in your life. He cried, Sophie said, so quietly Evelyn almost missed it. After he talked to you on the phone. He didn't think I saw, but I did. I don't like it when Dad cries. Evelyn pressed her free hand against her mouth, trying to keep herself together. In the background, she heard Nathan's voice, muffled. Sophie, that's enough. But Dad, say goodbye, sweetie. I don't want to say goodbye, Sophie said, and now she sounded close to tears herself. I want Miss Ellie. I want Evelyn to come back. I know. Nathan's voice was closer now, like he'd taken the phone. But that's not how this works. Say goodbye. A sniffle. Then, bye, Evelyn. Bye, Sophie. But the line was already dead. Evelyn sat in her office and let herself cry for the first time in years. Not the careful, controlled tears she'd allowed herself after bad board meetings or failed negotiations. Real crying. The kind that made her chest hurt and her breathing ragged and left her makeup ruined. When she finally stopped, she called Marco. I need to do something big, she said when he answered. How big? Big enough that Nathan knows I mean it. That this isn't just me trying to win an argument or soothe my guilty conscience. Big enough that Sophie knows I'm not going anywhere. Marco was quiet for a moment. You sure about this? Because once you do something big, you can't take it back. Can't pretend it didn't matter if things don't work out. I'm sure. Okay, what did you have in mind? Evelyn told him. Marco whistled. That's not big, he said. That's insane. Will it work? I have no idea, but it'll definitely get his attention. Then let's do it. She spent the next week putting pieces in place, made calls, signed papers, had conversations with people who looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. But for the first time since this whole thing started, Evelyn felt like she was doing something right instead of just trying not to do something wrong. On Friday afternoon, she drove to Kohl's Auto Repair. The building was small, tucked between a laundromat and a place that sold used sporting equipment. A sign in the window said they closed at 6. It was 5:45. Evelyn sat in her car, her real car this time, the Tesla, and tried to calm her racing heart. She could still back out, could drive away and let this whole thing fade into memory. Nathan would move on eventually, find someone else, someone who didn't lie to him from the start. But she couldn't stand the thought of Sophie thinking this was her fault. Couldn't stand the thought of Nathan believing she'd only cared about him as an experiment. She got out of the car and walked to the shop. The front area was small. A counter, a couple of chairs, a coffee maker that looked like it had seen better days. Through the window into the garage, Evelyn could see Nathan bent over the hood of a truck, wrench in hand. He was alone. No sign of the part-time guy Rachel had mentioned. Evelyn rang the bell on the counter. Nathan looked up, saw her. His whole body went rigid. He set down the wrench and walked to the front, stopping on the other side of the counter like it was a barrier he needed. Up close, Evelyn could see the exhaustion in his face, the kind that came from not sleeping, from crying when you thought your daughter wasn't watching. "We're about to close," Nathan said. His voice was flat. "I know. I just need 5 minutes." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." Evelyn forced herself to meet his eyes. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I need to tell you something, and I need to do it in person." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You could have been honest in person from the start. That would have been great." "You're right, I should have, and I can't undo that, but I can—" She stopped, pulled an envelope from her bag. "I can do this." She set it on the counter. Nathan looked at it like it might explode. "What is it?" "Open it." He did, slowly, pulled out the papers inside, read them. His eyebrows drew together. "I don't understand," he said. "It's a grant," Evelyn explained, "for small businesses in Aspen. $50,000, no strings attached. You can use it to pay down your loan, hire more staff, upgrade equipment, whatever you need." Nathan looked up at her, confusion shifting to something harder. "You're trying to buy your way back in." "No, I'm trying to help you. The grant's real. It's from Tech North Solutions, from my company. We're launching a program to support local businesses. You're the first recipient." "How convenient," Nathan said, and the bitterness in his voice cut deep. "I bet I'm the only mechanic in town who happens to be dating the CEO." "You're not dating me anymore," Evelyn said quietly. "And this has nothing to do with that. This is about—" She stopped, trying to find the right words. "You told me once that you opened this shop because you wanted to build something for Sophie, something that would be hers someday. I'm trying to help you do that. Not because I want something from you, because you deserve it." Nathan set the papers down, hands flat on either side of them. "I don't want your money, Evelyn. It's not my money. It's a business grant, completely legitimate. You'd have to apply like anyone else, but I'm telling you now that you'd qualify. And if I say no, then you say no, and I leave and I don't come back." Evelyn's voice cracked despite her effort to keep it steady. "But before I go, I need you to know something. What I felt for you, what I feel for you, that was never a lie. Ellie wasn't some character I was playing. She was just me without all the walls I've built up. And being with you made me realize how tired I am of those walls." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "You broke Sophie's heart. I know, and I'm so sorry. That's why I called her, why I told her this wasn't her fault. She still asks about you, every day, wants to know when you're coming back. When we're going to have dinner with dinosaur documentaries." Nathan's hands curled into fists on the counter. "And I don't know what to tell her because I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if anything you showed me was real." It was real. Evelyn's eyes burned. All of it. The breakfast, the market, the way I felt when Sophie hugged me goodbye. That was the realest thing I've felt in years. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to believe that. "I want to," Nathan said, "but wanting something doesn't make it true." "What too much imtis?" They stood there on opposite sides of the counter, close enough to touch, but separated by everything Evelyn had done. She wanted to reach for him, wanted to make promises she wasn't sure she could keep. But Rachel's words echoed in her head. "You need to show him, not just tell him." "Keep the grant application," Evelyn said. "Think about it. Even if you never want to see me again, let me do this one thing to help. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness, because Sophie deserves a dad who isn't stretched so thin he can barely breathe. And you deserve to build something without breaking yourself to do it." She turned to leave, made it 3 steps before Nathan said her name. "Evelyn?" She stopped, turned back. Nathan was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Why did you really tell me? About being Evelyn Carter? Was it just because of the investigator?" "No," Evelyn said. "It was because I couldn't stand lying to you anymore. Because every time you trusted me with something real, I felt like a fraud. And I kept thinking—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I kept thinking that if I loved you, really loved you, then I needed to give you the truth, even if it meant losing you." Nathan's eyes widened slightly at the word love. Evelyn realized what she'd said and felt panic spike through her. "I should go," she said quickly. "Wait." Nathan came around the counter, moved closer. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that Evelyn could see the exact shade of brown in his eyes. "Say that again, the last part." "Which part?" "You know which part." Evelyn's heart was trying to break out of her chest. "I love you. I know I have no right to say that after what I did, but it's true. I love you, and I love Sophie, and I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me. Not as Ellie, as me. Whoever that is." Nathan stared at her. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might say something, might close the distance between them. But then his expression shuddered, and he stepped back. "I need time," he said, "to think, to figure out what I want. I understand. And I need you to stay away from Sophie until I do. Because if this doesn't work out, if I decide I can't do this, then it's easier if she hasn't gotten used to having you around again." Each word was a knife, but Evelyn nodded. "Okay." "Okay." Nathan moved back behind the counter, putting the physical barrier between them again. "I'll call you. When I'm ready. If I'm ready." "I'll wait," Evelyn said. She left before he could see her crying again, sat in her Tesla and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and tried to breathe through the pain. She'd told him she loved him, had laid herself bare in a way she'd never done before, and he'd asked for space. Maybe that was all she deserved. Maybe space was the kindest thing he could give her after everything she'd done. But as Evelyn drove home through the darkening streets, she couldn't help hoping that space meant room to grow back together. Not a permanent distance, just time to heal. She'd wait, for as long as it took. Because that's what you did when you loved someone. You gave them the truth, even when it hurt. And then you gave them the space to decide what to do with it. 2 weeks passed with no word from Nathan. Evelyn told herself she was fine with it, that she'd meant what she said about waiting. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. Every time it wasn't him, something inside her sank a little deeper. She threw herself into work with an intensity that had her assistant worried and her board members pleased. Approved the small business grant program that had started as an excuse to help Nathan and turned into something real. Hired a team to vet applications, set up criteria that had nothing to do with who she was dating or had dated or wanted to date again. Made it legitimate because if Nathan ever did accept it, she needed him to know it wasn't charity. On a Thursday afternoon, Marco showed up at her office with his laptop and an expression that meant trouble. "We have a problem," he said, setting the laptop on her desk and turning it to face her. The screen showed a gossip blog, the kind that fed on rumors about tech industry drama. The headline read, "Tech North CEO's secret romance with small-town mechanic ends in tears." Below it, photos. Evelyn and Nathan at the Humble Spoon, at the Winter Market. The same surveillance shots Crawford had shown her, now posted for anyone with an internet connection to see. When did this go live? Evelyn's voice was remarkably steady considering her hands were shaking. An hour ago. It's already getting traction on social media. Tech Twitter thinks it's hilarious. Someone made a meme about you going undercover like you're in a rom-com. Evelyn scanned the article. It had most of the facts wrong, claimed she'd been using Nathan for publicity, that the whole relationship was a setup, that she dumped him when she got bored. But it had enough truth mixed in to be dangerous. Her real name? Nathan's shop. Even a mention of Sophie, though thankfully no photo of her. Preston, Evelyn said. Most likely. Though he's smart enough to have someone else leak it. Probably sold the photos to the blog through an intermediary. Evelyn closed the laptop. Has Nathan seen this? I don't know. Maybe. It's making the rounds pretty fast. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Evelyn answered anyway. Miss Carter? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. This is Jennifer Klein from the Aspen Daily News. I'm writing a story about your relationship with Nathan Cole, and I was hoping to get a comment. No comment, Evelyn said, and hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. Evelyn sent it to voicemail. It's going to be like this all day, Marco said. Maybe longer. You need to put out a statement. Control the narrative before it controls you. No. Evelyn, I said no. Any statement I make just confirms the story. makes it bigger. If I stay quiet, it dies down in a few days. And Nathan, you think he's going to appreciate having reporters calling his shop, his sister, his daughter's school? The thought made Evelyn's stomach turn. I'll talk to him, warn him. He's not taking your calls, remember? Then I'll go there. Evelyn stood up, grabbed her coat. I need to make sure he knows I didn't leak this, that I'm not using him for publicity. Marco caught her arm. Think about this. You show up at his shop right now. You could have photographers following you. Could make this whole thing worse. I don't care. He needs to know. She drove to Cole's Auto Repair with her heart in her throat, checking her mirrors for anyone tailing her. The lot was empty except for Nathan's truck and a sedan she didn't recognize. The shop was open, lights on, but when Evelyn walked in, Nathan wasn't at the counter. Rachel was. She looked up from a clipboard and her expression went cold. You need to leave, Rachel said. I need to talk to Nathan. He doesn't want to talk to you, especially not now. He saw the article. It wasn't a question. He saw it. So did half of Aspen, apparently. I've had 3 people ask me about it just today. One of them was Sophie's teacher, who wanted to know if we were dealing with a situation that might affect Sophie's well-being at school. Rachel set down the clipboard with more force than necessary. So yeah, he saw it. I didn't leak those photos. I didn't want any of this to go public. Doesn't matter. It's out there, and now Sophie's going to see it eventually, or hear about it from some kid whose parents gossip. And she's going to know that the woman she trusted was lying to her dad and making everyone look like fools. That's not... Evelyn stopped. Where's Nathan? Not here. And before you ask, I'm not telling you where he is. You've done enough. Rachel, please. I just need 5 minutes. I need him to know I didn't do this. What? He knows you didn't do it. He's not stupid. He knows your ex hired that investigator, knows someone leaked the photos to hurt you both. But that doesn't change the fact that this whole mess started because you lied. Rachel's voice softened slightly. Look, I get that you care about him. I even believe you didn't mean to hurt him. But you did hurt him. And now he's dealing with the fallout while you're, what exactly? Hiding in your office? Sending lawyers after anyone who publishes stories about you? I'm trying to fix this. You can't fix it. It's already broken. Rachel picked up her clipboard again. Go home, Evelyn. Let him have some space to figure out what he wants without you pushing. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to demand Rachel's help, to push past her into the garage and find Nathan herself. But Rachel was right. She'd already pushed enough, already forced Nathan into impossible positions because of her choices. Tell him I'm sorry, Evelyn said quietly, and tell him if he needs me to make a statement denying the relationship, if it would make things easier for Sophie, I will. Rachel's expression shifted slightly. You'd do that? Of course, I don't care about my reputation. I care about them. I'll tell him. Rachel hesitated. For what it's worth, I think you mean it. I think you really do care. But meaning it isn't enough. Not when there's a 6-year-old involved. Evelyn nodded and left before her composure could crack. She made it back to her car, back to her house, back to the safety of her empty rooms before she let herself fall apart. Not crying this time. Just sitting on her couch in the dark and staring at nothing and wondering how many different ways a person could ruin the best thing that ever happened to them. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Rachel. Nathan says no statement. He doesn't want Sophie seeing you deny you cared about them. Says it would hurt her worse. Evelyn stared at the message. Even now, even hurt and angry, and dealing with public scrutiny he never asked for, Nathan was thinking about Sophie first, about protecting her from more pain. She typed back, "Thank you for telling me, and thank you for being there for them." The response came quickly. Someone has to be. It stung, but it was fair. Evelyn set down her phone and looked around her house. The place she'd bought because it had good views and modern appliances and enough space to host the dinner parties she never threw. It was beautiful and empty and utterly joyless. She thought about Nathan's house. She'd never been there, but she could imagine it. Probably small. Probably cluttered with Sophie's dinosaur books and art projects and the accumulated chaos of a single father raising a kid alone. Probably more of a home than this place had ever been. The next morning, Evelyn woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 emails. The story had grown legs overnight. Tech blogs were speculating about whether the relationship had affected her judgment. Business outlets were questioning whether TechNorth's new grant program was a conflict of interest. Someone had dug up her relationship history with Preston and was painting her as a serial heartbreaker. Maria called at 8 a.m. The office is getting flooded with press requests. Should I tell them no comment? Tell them I'll make a statement this afternoon. Evelyn was already getting dressed, pulling on clothes that felt like armor. Set up a press conference for 2 p.m. Are you sure that's a good idea? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She spent the morning writing and rewriting what she wanted to say. Marco showed up at noon with coffee and moral support, read her draft, and shook his head. You can't say all this, he said. It's too personal, too vulnerable. They'll eat you alive. Let them. I'm done hiding. Evelyn, I'm doing this, Marco, with or without your help. He sighed. Fine. But I'm editing this thing before you read it, because as it stands, you're basically handing them your heart on a platter and asking them to carve it up. They worked through lunch. By the time 2 p.m. rolled around, Evelyn had a statement that was professional enough to satisfy Marco and honest enough to satisfy herself. She stood in the conference room at TechNorth's offices, facing a dozen cameras and twice as many reporters, and tried not to think about Nathan watching this somewhere. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice steady. I know there's been a lot of speculation about my personal life over the last few days. I want to address some of that directly. She paused, took a breath. It's true that I was in a relationship with Nathan Cole. It's also true that I wasn't entirely honest with him at the beginning of that relationship. I used a different name and didn't disclose my position at TechNorth because I wanted to meet someone who would value me for who I am, not what I have. That was wrong. It was manipulative and it hurt someone who deserved better. I take full responsibility for that. A reporter raised her hand. Evelyn ignored her and kept going. The photos that were published were taken without our knowledge or consent by a private investigator hired by someone from my past. That person wanted to interfere in my relationship and chose to do so by invading our privacy. I'm pursuing legal action against both the investigator and the person who hired him, and I want to be clear that Nathan Cole had nothing to do with any of this. He's a good man, a devoted father, and a respected member of this community. He doesn't deserve to be dragged into tabloid speculation. Ms. Carter, another reporter tried to interject. Evelyn talked over them. The grant program that TechNorth is launching was developed independently of my personal life. It's designed to support small businesses in Aspen, regardless of any connection to me or my company. The selection process is handled by an independent committee, and I have recused myself from any decisions involving Cole's auto repair. That said, I want to be clear. Nathan Cole is exactly the kind of business owner this program was designed to help. He's built something from nothing, serves his community, and deserves support. If he chooses to apply for the grant and is selected by the committee, it will be because he earned it, not because we were in a relationship. She stopped, met the eyes of the reporters staring at her. I know that's not the story you wanted. You wanted drama and conflict and some salacious detail about a CEO slumming it with a mechanic. But that's not what this was. This was me being scared of getting hurt and making choices that hurt someone else instead. This was me learning that you can't test love like a hypothesis. You can't control it or manage it or protect yourself from it. You can only choose to be honest and hope that's enough. Are you still in a relationship with Mr. Cole? Someone called out. No, Evelyn said, and the word hurt more than she expected. We're not together, and that's my fault. But regardless of what happens between us, I want everyone to know that he did nothing wrong. If you're going to write stories about this, write them about me. Leave him and his family out of it. She stepped away from the microphone. The reporters erupted with questions, but Evelyn was already leaving, Marco running interference behind her. They made it to her office, and she closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Well, Marco said. That was either really brave or really stupid. Probably both. Nathan's going to see it. I know. He might not appreciate you making a public statement about your relationship. He told Rachel not to deny we cared about each other. I didn't deny it. I confirmed it. Evelyn moved to her desk, sank into her chair. If that makes things worse, then they were already as bad as they could get. Her phone rang. Rachel's number. Evelyn answered. I saw the press conference, Rachel said without preamble. So did Nathan. Evelyn's heart stopped. And? And he's not happy that you made this public, but he's also not unhappy. Rachel paused. He asked me to tell you that you didn't have to do that, didn't have to defend him. Yes, I did. He also said, Rachel stopped, sighed. He said he needs more time, but to tell you he appreciates what you said. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even close, but it was something, a crack in the wall. Thank you, Evelyn said, for telling me. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. I'm not your go-between. But Rachel's voice was softer than it had been. He's scared, Evelyn, really scared, of getting hurt again, yeah, but also of making the wrong choice for Sophie. She's already been through so much. He won't put her through losing someone else if you're not in this for real. I am in this for real. Then prove it. Not with press conferences or grant programs or grand gestures. Prove it by being patient, by giving him the space he needs to trust you again. The line went dead. Evelyn set down her phone and looked out the window at the mountains. Snow was coming, the sky heavy with it. In a few days, maybe a week, the passes would close and Aspen would be sealed off from the world for a while. Just locals and the people committed enough to winter here. She wondered if Nathan would still be thinking about her by the time the snow melted. Wondered if Sophie would remember Miss Ellie or if she'd become just another person who'd left. The days that followed were strange. The press conference had done what Evelyn hoped, shifted the narrative away from Nathan and onto her. Now the stories were about her judgment, her choices, her apparent inability to maintain a relationship. Tech blogs debated whether a CEO should be held to a higher standard in their personal life. Business outlets questioned whether the scandal would affect TechNorth's reputation. Evelyn ignored most of it. Let Marco handle the press inquiries while she focused on work. But at night, alone in her house, she couldn't stop thinking about Nathan and Sophie. Couldn't stop wondering what they were doing, whether Sophie still asked about her, whether Nathan had thrown away the grant application or filed it. 3 weeks after the press conference, on a Sunday morning that felt like every other Sunday, except she wasn't meeting Nathan for breakfast, Evelyn's doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone, considered not answering, but something made her get up from her coffee and her laptop in her attempt to focus on anything other than the fact that it was Sunday and she was alone. She opened the door. Sophie stood on her porch in a purple coat and pink boots, holding Nathan's hand. Evelyn's brain short-circuited. Sophie? Hi, Sophie said, looking uncertain in a way that broke Evelyn's heart. Dad said we could come talk to you. Is that okay? Evelyn looked up at Nathan. He looked tired, thinner than she remembered, but his eyes weren't angry anymore, just wary. Can we come in? Nathan asked quietly. Evelyn stepped aside. They came into her house and she watched Sophie's eyes go wide at the high ceilings and the mountain views and all the expensive nothing that filled the space. Your house is really big, Sophie said. It is, Evelyn agreed. Want something to drink? I have juice boxes. Sophie nodded. Nathan gave her a look that said he was surprised Evelyn had juice boxes, but Evelyn just led them to the kitchen. She'd bought them 2 weeks ago on a grocery run where she'd cried in the juice aisle like a crazy person because she'd been thinking about Sophie. Sophie took her juice box to the living room window and stared out at the mountains. Nathan stayed in the kitchen with Evelyn, both of them standing on opposite sides of the island like they were negotiating a treaty. I saw your press conference, Nathan said. I know, Rachel told me. You didn't have to do that. Didn't have to defend me publicly. Yes, I did. You didn't ask for any of this. The least I could do was make sure people knew that. Nathan looked down at the counter, traced a pattern in the granite with one finger. Sophie wanted to come. She's been asking about you every day since we talked on the phone. I kept putting her off, telling her I needed time. But this morning she asked if you were sad and alone, and I realized... He stopped. I realized I was being selfish, making this about my hurt instead of what's actually best for her. And what's best for her? I don't know yet. Nathan met her eyes. But I know hiding you from her because I'm scared, isn't it? So I'm here. We're here. To talk. Sophie came back into the kitchen with her empty juice box. Can I see your room? Sophie, Nathan said, that's not polite. It's okay. Evelyn smiled at Sophie. Come on, I'll show you. She led Sophie upstairs, acutely aware of Nathan following behind them. Her bedroom was embarrassingly large, embarrassingly empty. A king-size bed with too many pillows. A closet that could fit 3 of Sophie's bedrooms. Windows that showed nothing but sky and snow and distance. Sophie looked around with the kind of wonder that made Evelyn see the space differently. You have so much room. Don't you get lonely? The question hit like a fist to the chest. Sometimes, Evelyn admitted. Our house is small, Sophie said, but it's good because me and Dad are always close. He says when you love someone, you want them nearby. Evelyn looked at Nathan. He was leaning in the doorway, watching them with an expression she couldn't read. Your dad's right, Evelyn said. Sophie nodded, satisfied. Then she spotted the bookshelf in the corner and made a beeline for it. Evelyn had bought a dozen dinosaur books after the breakup, another crying in public moment she wasn't proud of. Sophie pulled one out and sat on the floor, immediately absorbed. Nathan moved closer to Evelyn. We need to talk. Adult conversation. Okay? They went back downstairs, left Sophie with her book. In the kitchen, Nathan poured himself coffee without asking, and Evelyn let him because it felt almost normal, almost like he belonged here. I've been thinking, Nathan said, about what you said at the shop, about loving me. Evelyn's heart started racing. Okay. And I've been trying to figure out if I believe you, if what we had was real or if it was just, he gestured vaguely, some rich person fantasy about escaping your real life for a while. It wasn't a fantasy. Then what was it? Evelyn took a breath. It was me being terrified. Of getting hurt again, yeah, but also of losing myself. I built this life, she gestured at the house around them, this successful, controlled, independent life. And then I met you and suddenly I wanted something different, something messier, something I couldn't control. And that scared me so badly that I sabotaged it before it could sabotage me. By lying. By lying, Evelyn agreed. Which was exactly the wrong thing to do. I know that now. But at the time I thought I was protecting myself. I thought if I could just prove you were good, prove you'd care about Ellie the same way you'd care about Evelyn, then I'd be safe. And then what? Nathan's voice was quiet. You were just going to keep being Ellie forever? I don't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I think part of me knew it couldn't last, that eventually the truth would come out and I'd lose you. But I kept going anyway because being with you felt better than being smart felt good. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Sophie asked me if I still love you. Evelyn's breath caught. What did you tell her? I told her love is complicated. That sometimes you can love someone and still be hurt by them. And she said that didn't make sense because if you love someone, you forgive them. Nathan's mouth twitched into almost a smile. 6-year-old logic. Everything's simple when you're 6. What do you think? I think she's not wrong. I think I do still love you, but I also think love isn't enough if there's no trust. And I don't know how to trust you again when our entire relationship started with a lie. So where does that leave us? Evelyn forced herself to ask even though she was terrified of the answer. Nathan set down his coffee cup. I applied for the grant, the business grant from Tech North. Evelyn blinked at the subject change. You did? Yeah, filled out the application last week. Haven't heard back yet, but Rachel convinced me I should at least try. Said you were right that I deserve help, that pride is just fear dressed up in work boots. He looked at Evelyn, and I started thinking about what you said, about how you wanted to help not because you expected something back, but because I deserved it. And I realized that's what love is supposed to be. Not transactions, not tests. Just wanting good things for someone even when they can't give you anything in return. Nathan, let me finish. He held up a hand. I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not saying everything's fine now. But I'm saying I want to try. To see if we can build something real this time, starting from honesty instead of hiding. Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes. I want that too. And Sophie needs to be part of this conversation because if we do this, if we try again, you're not just dating me. You're signing up for soccer games and school plays and dinosaur facts at 6 in the morning. You're signing up for all of it. I know. Do you? Because your life right now, Nathan gestured at the house. This is what you built for yourself. Quiet, controlled, and my life is chaos. It's constantly being interrupted, constantly making sacrifices, constantly putting someone else first. That's what being a parent means. And if you're with me, that's what it means for you too. I'm not afraid of chaos, Evelyn said. I'm afraid of being alone in a big empty house, pretending I'm fine with it. I'm afraid of building something perfect that makes me miserable. I want the chaos. I want the interruptions. I want Sophie's dinosaur facts and your motor oil smell and Sunday mornings that don't feel like I'm slowly disappearing. Nathan's eyes softened. You really mean that? I really mean it, and I'll prove it. However long it takes, I'll prove that I'm not going anywhere. Footsteps on the stairs. Sophie appeared holding the dinosaur book. Can I take this home? You can keep it, Evelyn said. It's yours. Sophie's face lit up. Really? Really. And if you want, there are more books in my car. I bought them thinking maybe someday I could give them to you. Dad, Sophie said, turning to Nathan, can Evelyn come over for dinner? For real this time? Nathan looked at Evelyn. Something passed between them, fragile and tentative, but real. Yeah, Nathan said. She can come over for dinner. Sophie cheered and threw her arms around Evelyn's waist, and Evelyn had to close her eyes against the sudden rush of emotion. When she opened them again, Nathan was watching her with an expression that was almost a smile. Next Saturday, he said, spaghetti and dinosaur documentaries, if you're serious about this. I'm serious. Good. Nathan finished his coffee. Then we'll see you Saturday. They left. Evelyn stood in her doorway and watched them walk to Nathan's truck, watched Sophie climb in still clutching her book, watched Nathan pause before getting in the driver's seat and look back at her. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just looked at her like he was trying to figure something out. Then he got in the truck and drove away. And Evelyn went back inside her big empty house that felt a little less empty than it had an hour ago. She had 6 days to figure out how to show Nathan she meant it. 6 days to prove she wasn't just running toward chaos, but running toward them. 6 days to transform from someone who tested love into someone who trusted it. It wasn't much time, but it was a start. And after weeks of nothing, a start felt like everything. Saturday came slower than Evelyn wanted and faster than she was ready for. She spent the week in a state of controlled panic, second-guessing everything. What did you bring to dinner at the home of someone you'd lied to for weeks? Wine felt too formal. Flowers felt like trying too hard. A gift for Sophie felt like she was buying her way back in. In the end, she settled on ingredients, called Nathan on Thursday night, the first time she'd called him since the breakup, and asked what he was making. Just spaghetti, Nathan said, his voice careful. Nothing fancy. Can I bring the sauce? I have a recipe my grandmother used to make. A pause. Then, your grandmother? She was Italian, came over when she was 19 and married a man she'd known for 3 weeks. My mother thought she was crazy, but she always said when you know, you know. Evelyn stopped, realizing she was rambling. The sauce is good. That's all I meant. Okay, Nathan said, and she could hear the almost smile in his voice. You can bring the sauce. So Saturday afternoon found Evelyn in her kitchen, making sauce from scratch for the first time in years. The recipe was one of the few things she had from her grandmother, written in faded pencil on a stained index card, measurements approximate, instructions vague. Evelyn had to call her mother twice for clarification, which led to questions about why she was suddenly cooking, which led to a conversation Evelyn wasn't ready to have, but had anyway. Because apparently this week was about being honest even when it was uncomfortable. You're seeing someone, her mother said, statement, not question. I'm trying to. It's complicated. It's always complicated. Is he good to you? Evelyn thought about Nathan buying Sophie books he couldn't afford, about the way he'd set boundaries at the winter market, about how he'd asked for space instead of just ghosting her. He's better than good. He's real. Then fight for him, her mother said simply. Your grandmother didn't cross an ocean to teach you how to run away. The sauce simmered. Evelyn's kitchen filled with the smell of tomatoes and garlic and basil, and for the first time in weeks, her house felt almost lived in. She packed the sauce in a container, changed clothes 3 times, and finally settled on jeans and a sweater that looked casual but had cost enough that she felt guilty about it. Nathan's address led her to a small neighborhood on the east side of town, the kind of place where houses sat close together and kids' bikes leaned against porches. His house was a 1-story ranch with blue shutters and a front yard that needed mowing. A plastic dinosaur stood guard by the mailbox. Sophie's touch, clearly. Evelyn sat in her car for a full minute, sauce container in her lap, trying to calm her racing heart. This was it. The moment where she either proved Marco right, that she could fight for what she wanted, or proved herself right, that she was too broken to build anything that lasted. The front door opened. Sophie came running out in her purple dress, the one from the reading program, and Evelyn's heart squeezed. "You came!" Sophie shouted, like there had been any doubt. Evelyn got out of the car. "Of course I came. I brought sauce." "Dad's making garlic bread. He burned the first batch, but the second one looks okay." Sophie grabbed Evelyn's free hand and pulled her toward the house. "Come on, I want to show you my room." Nathan appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, his hair still damp from a shower, and Evelyn's breath caught at how normal he looked. How right. "Hey," Nathan said. "Hey." Evelyn held up the sauce container. "I made this. If it's terrible, we can order pizza." "It smells amazing." Nathan took the container, their fingers brushing for half a second. "Come in. Sorry about the mess." The house was small and cluttered in exactly the way Evelyn had imagined. Dinosaur books stacked on the coffee table. Sophie's artwork taped to the fridge. A jacket hanging over the back of a chair. Signs of life everywhere. Signs of people actually living instead of just existing. Sophie dragged Evelyn down the hallway to a bedroom painted lavender with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Stuffed animals covered the bed. A poster of a T-Rex hung on one wall. A small bookshelf overflowed with chapter books and picture books and the dinosaur field guide Nathan had bought at the winter market. "This is where I read," Sophie said, pointing to a beanbag chair in the corner. "And this is where I keep my rocks." A shoebox full of rocks and fossils sat on the floor. "And this is Rexy." She picked up a stuffed triceratops that had clearly been loved to the point of falling apart. "Dad says when I'm old enough I can go to a real dig site and find real fossils." "That sounds incredible," Evelyn said. "Do you want to see my science project? It's about the Cretaceous period." For the next 20 minutes, Evelyn sat on Sophie's floor and listened to a presentation about extinction events that was simultaneously too advanced for a 6-year-old and delivered with the kind of enthusiasm that made every word matter. Nathan appeared in the doorway halfway through, leaned against the frame, and just watched them with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite read. When Sophie finally paused for breath, Nathan said, "Dinner's ready. If you two want to take a break from mass extinction." They ate at a small table in the kitchen, the 3 of them crowded around plates of spaghetti and garlic bread that was only slightly burned. Sophie talked nonstop about school and her teacher and a kid named Marcus who thought he knew everything about dinosaurs but actually didn't. Nathan listened and asked questions and refilled Evelyn's water glass without being asked. It was so normal it hurt. This was what she'd been missing all those years in her big empty house. Not the chaos exactly, but the connection. The sense that she mattered to someone beyond what she could do for them. After dinner, Sophie wanted to watch a documentary about paleontology. They moved to the living room, Sophie squeezed between Evelyn and Nathan on a couch that had seen better days, and for an hour Evelyn learned more about fossil formation than she'd ever thought she'd need to know. Halfway through, Sophie fell asleep, her head on Evelyn's shoulder, one hand still clutching a toy stegosaurus. Evelyn looked down at her and felt something crack open in her chest. This little girl who'd already lost so much, who'd learned not to trust too quickly, had fallen asleep on her, trusted her enough to be vulnerable. "I should put her to bed," Nathan said quietly. He scooped Sophie up like she weighed nothing, carried her down the hall. Evelyn heard the muffled sounds of bedtime routine, running water, Sophie's sleepy protests, Nathan's patient responses. Then silence. Nathan came back alone, sat on the opposite end of the couch from where Sophie had been, and looked at Evelyn. She missed you, he said. I missed her too. She told Rachel she was scared you didn't like her anymore. That's why you stopped coming around. Nathan's voice was tight. I tried to explain it wasn't about her, but 6-year-olds don't really get adult relationship problems. I'm sorry. I never wanted her to think any of this was her fault. I know, but knowing something doesn't change how it feels. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. That's what I've been trying to figure out this whole time. How to separate knowing you didn't mean to hurt us from feeling hurt anyway. Evelyn turned to face him fully. Have you figured it out? Not completely, but I'm starting to think maybe that's okay. Maybe trust isn't something you figure out all at once. Maybe it's something you build back piece by piece. He met her eyes. Rachel told me what you did, with the press conference, taking the blame publicly, protecting us. It was the least I could do. No, it was more than that. It was you making a choice to be vulnerable even when it cost you, to put us first. Nathan shifted slightly closer. And then you came here tonight and sat on my daughter's floor and listened to her talk about the Mesozoic era like it was the most important thing in the world. You didn't check your phone once, didn't act like you had somewhere better to be. I don't have somewhere better to be. This is... Evelyn gestured at the small living room with its worn couch and kid clutter. This is exactly where I want to be. Even though it's not what you're used to, even though my house is the size of your bedroom and I can't afford to take you to fancy restaurants or buy you expensive things. Nathan, Evelyn waited until he looked at her. I don't want fancy restaurants. I want this. I want Saturday dinners and dinosaur documentaries and a kid who falls asleep on my shoulder because she feels safe. That's worth more than anything money can buy. You say that now. I say that now, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me. Evelyn took a breath. I know I hurt you. I know trust doesn't come back just because I show up for one dinner, but I'm asking you to let me keep showing up. Let me prove this isn't a phase or a fantasy. Let me prove I'm serious about building a life with you and Sophie. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What does that look like? Building a life together when our lives are so different. I don't know exactly, but I know it starts with honesty, with me not hiding who I am or what I have, with you not assuming I'm going to leave the minute things get hard. Evelyn hesitated. And maybe it means making some changes, not to who we are, but to how we live. What kind of changes? I've been thinking about my house. It's too big, too empty. I bought it because I thought space equaled success, but really, it just equals lonely. She looked around Nathan's living room, at the pictures on the walls and the toys in the corner, and the lived-in warmth of it all. I want to sell it, buy something smaller, something that feels like a home instead of a showroom. Nathan's eyebrows went up. That's a big decision. It's the right decision. I should have made it years ago. Evelyn shifted closer. And I've been thinking about work, about how much time I spend trying to prove I'm successful instead of actually enjoying what I've built. I want to step back. Not completely, I still love what I do, but enough that I have time for other things. For people. For this. You do that? I want to do that. Not because you're asking me to, but because I'm tired of being married to my job. I'm tired of choosing control over connection. She reached for his hand, slowly enough that he could pull away if he wanted. He didn't. I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly how to blend our lives together, but I know I want to try, if you'll let me. Nathan looked down at their joined hands. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of letting you close and then watching you realize this isn't what you actually want. Scared of Sophie getting attached and then losing you like she lost her mom. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. I probably will. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere. I can promise that when things get hard, and they will get hard, I won't run. I'll stay and we'll figure it out together. How do I know that? You don't. Not for sure. You have to take a leap of faith. Evelyn squeezed his hand. The same way I'm taking a leap of faith that you can forgive me, that we can build something real out of the mess I made. Nathan was quiet for so long Evelyn thought she might have pushed too hard. Then he said, Sophie asked me something yesterday, asked if I was going to marry you. Evelyn's heart stopped. What did you say? I said it was too soon to know, that we had to take things slow and see if we could make it work. He looked up, met her eyes. And she said that was dumb because when you love someone, you should just tell them. You should just ask them to stay. She's 6. She's also not wrong. Nathan's mouth quirked into almost a smile. Kids see things clearly because they haven't learned to overcomplicate everything yet. They just know what they want and they go for it. And what do you want? I want what I had before you told me the truth. I want Sunday breakfasts and easy conversation and someone who looks at me like I'm enough exactly as I am. Nathan's voice went rough. But I also want it to be real this time. I want to know the person I'm falling for actually exists. She does exist. I'm right here. Evelyn's eyes burned. No disguise, no test, just me. Evelyn Carter, CEO, terrible at relationships, excellent at self-sabotage, desperately in love with a mechanic and his daughter. You love Sophie? Of course I love Sophie. She's brilliant and weird and completely herself. She reminds me what it's like to care about something just because it matters, not because it's useful. Evelyn stopped, trying to find words that wouldn't sound too big too fast. She makes me want to be better. You both do. Nathan pulled his hand away, and for a horrible second Evelyn thought she'd gone too far. But then he stood up and held out his hand to her. Come here, he said. Evelyn took his hand, let him pull her to her feet, pull her close. They stood in his small living room with a dinosaur documentary paused on the TV and Sophie asleep down the hall, and Nathan cupped Evelyn's face in both hands. I'm still scared, he said. Me too. And I'm still hurt. That doesn't just go away. I know. But I love you anyway, even though I don't want to, even though it would be easier if I didn't. Nathan's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. And I think maybe that's what love is. Choosing someone even when they've hurt you. Choosing to trust even when trust is terrifying. Is that what you're doing? Choosing me? I'm choosing to try, to see if we can build something that lasts. He leaned his forehead against hers. But you have to meet me halfway. No more secrets, no more tests. If something's wrong, you tell me. If you're scared, you tell me. We figure it out together, or we don't figure it out at all. Deal, Evelyn whispered. Nathan kissed her. It was gentle and careful and nothing like the first time they'd kissed, back when she was still Ellie and everything was still a lie. This kiss was real. This kiss was a promise. When they pulled apart, Nathan said, Stay, tonight. Not like that. Sophie's here and I'm not ready for that conversation yet. But just stay. Sleep on the couch. Have breakfast with us in the morning. Start practicing what building a life together actually looks like. Okay, Evelyn said. I'll stay. She texted Marco to cancel her morning meetings. Nathan found her a blanket and a pillow that smelled like fabric softener and childhood. She made a nest on the couch that was lumpy and uncomfortable and perfect. And when Nathan kissed her goodnight and headed to his own bedroom, Evelyn lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of his house settling around her. This was what she'd been looking for all along. Not proof that good men existed. Not protection from being hurt. Just this. Just being part of something bigger than herself. Just mattering to people who mattered to her. She fell asleep thinking about Sophie's dinosaur facts and Nathan's careful hands and the way coming home could mean a place you'd never lived before. Morning came with Sophie jumping on the couch, yelling about pancakes. Evelyn woke up disoriented, tangled in the borrowed blanket, and for a second couldn't remember where she was. Then she saw Sophie's gap-toothed grin and Nathan in the kitchen doorway with bedhead and pajama pants, and everything clicked into place. You stayed, Sophie said, like it was the best news she'd heard all week. I stayed. Evelyn sat up, tried to smooth her hair. Your dad said something about pancakes? He makes them shaped like dinosaurs. Well, they're supposed to be dinosaurs. Mostly they look like blobs, but they taste good. Nathan made coffee and blob-shaped pancakes while Sophie narrated everything she planned to do that day. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table and felt the strangeness of this new normal settling over her like a second skin. She was in Nathan Cole's house in sweatpants she'd borrowed from him, drinking mediocre coffee from a chipped mug, about to eat pancakes that definitely did not look like dinosaurs. And she'd never been happier. After breakfast, Rachel showed up to take Sophie to a birthday party across town. She took one look at Evelyn sitting at Nathan's table and raised her eyebrows. "Productive evening?" Rachel asked. "We talked," Nathan said. "A lot." "Good. You needed to." Rachel turned to Evelyn. "You hurt him again, I'll make your life miserable, just so we're clear." "Crystal clear." "Good." Rachel grabbed Sophie's hand. "Come on, kiddo. Let's go celebrate Aiden's 7th year of existence." After they left, the house felt different, quieter, more charged. Nathan refilled their coffee and they sat across from each other at the table like they were negotiating something important. "So," Nathan said, "where do we go from here?" "I meant what I said last night about selling my house, about stepping back from work, about building a life with you and Sophie." "That's a lot of change all at once." "I know, but I've been thinking change is what I need. I've been stuck for so long trying to control everything, and all it's done is make me miserable." Evelyn wrapped her hands around her mug. "I want to be unstuck. I want to take risks. I want to build something with you that isn't perfect but is real." Nathan nodded slowly. "What about TechNorth? You just gonna walk away from everything you built?" "Not walk away, just reprioritize. I've been the only one steering the ship for so long I forgot how to let other people help. It's time to delegate, to trust my team to handle things without me micromanaging every decision." She paused. "I want to have time for Sunday breakfasts again, for markets and dinosaur documentaries and just being present instead of always working." "And what happens when you get bored, when being present isn't enough anymore?" "Then we figure it out, together. That's the whole point. I don't have to have all the answers right now. I just have to be willing to work through it with you." Nathan studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "The grant committee approved my application. I got the notification yesterday." Evelyn's heart jumped. "That's amazing." "Yeah, $50,000. Enough to hire a full-time mechanic, upgrade some equipment, maybe even expand the shop." He paused. "I almost turned it down." "Why?" "Because I didn't want people thinking I only got it because of you. Because we're together. You got it because you earned it. Because you run a good business and serve your community and exactly fit the criteria we established. I know that up here." Nathan tapped his head. "But knowing something and feeling it are different things. You taught me that." "So what changed your mind about taking it?" "Rachel, she told me pride is just fear wearing work boots. Said I was so scared of looking like I needed help that I was willing to turn down something that could actually help. And she was right. I've been doing everything alone for so long, I forgot it's okay to accept support." Nathan reached across the table, took Evelyn's hand. "So I'm taking the grant. And I'm taking a chance on us. Because maybe accepting help is how you build something that lasts." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I love you. I know I said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I love you, Nathan. Not because you're a good test subject or a project to fix. I love you because you're honest and kind and you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be happy." "I love you too," Nathan said quietly. "Even when I didn't want to, even when it hurt, I couldn't stop." They sat there holding hands across the table, and Evelyn thought about all the ways love could break a person and all the ways it could put them back together. She'd spent years protecting herself from being hurt, building walls so high nobody could climb them. And then Nathan had come along with his daughter and his dinosaur cookies and his complete inability to be anything other than exactly who he was, and all those walls had crumbled. The doorbell rang. Nathan frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone," he said. He went to answer it. Evelyn heard voices. Nathan's surprised, someone else's professional. Then Nathan came back with an envelope and a strange expression. "It's for you," he said. Evelyn took the envelope. Official TechNorth letterhead. She opened it, scanned the contents, and felt her stomach drop. "What is it?" Nathan asked. "It's from my board. They're calling an emergency meeting. Apparently there are concerns about my judgment given the recent publicity around my personal life. They want to discuss whether I should step down as CEO." Nathan's face went pale. Because of me. Because of Preston. Because of the media circus. Because boards get nervous when there's any kind of scandal. Evelyn set down the letter. This is what I was afraid of. That being with you would cost me everything I built. Then maybe we should— No! Evelyn cut him off. I'm not doing this again. I'm not sabotaging something good because I'm scared of losing something else. If the board wants me gone, they can vote me out. But I'm not walking away from you to save a job. Evelyn, I mean it. I've spent my whole life choosing work over everything else. Choosing safety over happiness. And where has it gotten me? A big empty house and a board that doesn't trust me, and no one to come home to at night. She stood up, started pacing. I'm done. Done letting fear make my decisions. Done sacrificing the things that actually matter for things that just look good on paper. Nathan caught her hand, stopped her pacing. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Then let's go to that meeting, together. Let them see that this isn't some scandal, that we're real, that you're not letting your judgment get clouded. You're making a choice about what kind of life you want to live. Evelyn stared at him. You do that? Come with me to face my board? You came to my shop when reporters were circling. You made a public statement defending me when you didn't have to. Yeah, I'll come with you to a board meeting. We're in this together, remember? The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Evelyn spent Sunday preparing her defense, running through arguments about why her personal life didn't affect her ability to lead the company. Nathan sat with her and listened and asked questions that made her sharpen her thinking. What's the worst that happens? He asked at one point. They vote me out. I lose the company I built. And then Evelyn stopped, thought about it. And then I start something new. Or I don't. Maybe I take some time off. Figure out who I am when I'm not working 90 hours a week. Would that be so bad? A month ago, I would have said yes. Now I honestly don't know. She looked at Nathan. Is that crazy? That I might be okay losing everything as long as I have you and Sophie? It's not crazy. It's perspective. Nathan pulled her close. But for what it's worth, I don't think you're going to lose anything. I think you're going to walk into that room and remind them exactly why they made you CEO in the first place. Monday morning, Evelyn put on her best suit and her most expensive heels and walked into TechNorth's conference room with Nathan beside her. The board members stared. Evelyn didn't care. Thank you all for coming, she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. I understand there are concerns about recent events. I'd like to address them directly. For the next hour, she laid it out. The whole story, nothing hidden. Preston's harassment, the private investigator, her decision to be honest about her relationship despite the professional risks. She talked about trust and integrity and the importance of making decisions based on values instead of fear. You're worried my personal life is affecting my judgment, she said, but I'd argue the opposite. For the first time in years, my judgment is clear. I'm not making decisions based on what looks good or what's safest. I'm making them based on what's right. And if that's not the kind of leadership you want, then maybe it's time for me to step down. The room was silent. Then Gerald, the oldest board member, leaned forward. Ms. Carter, he said, I've known you for 8 years. I've watched you build this company from 20 employees to over 200. I've seen you make impossible decisions and handle crises that would have broken other leaders. And in all that time, I've never once questioned your judgment. Then why now? Because we got scared. The press coverage, the speculation, it made us nervous, made us think maybe you were becoming a liability. Gerald looked around the table. But having heard your explanation, I think we were wrong. I think you handled an impossible situation with grace and integrity, and I think we'd be fools to let you go. Other board members nodded. A few looked ashamed. One by one, they voiced their support. When it was done, there was no vote. No formal decision, just a unanimous agreement that Evelyn Carter was exactly where she belonged. After the meeting, Nathan was waiting in her office. Evelyn closed the door and sagged against it. How did it go, then? He asked. They want me to stay. All of them. She laughed, slightly hysterical. I was so ready to lose it all, and they want me to stay. Nathan crossed the room, pulled her into his arms. Of course they do. You're brilliant and strong, and you just face down a room full of powerful people because you refuse to compromise your values. Who wouldn't want you?" Evelyn buried her face in his shoulder and let herself feel the relief. She hadn't lost her job, hadn't had to choose between her career and her life. Maybe she could have both. Maybe she didn't have to sacrifice one for the other. "I'm still selling the house," she said into his shirt. Nathan laughed. "Okay. And I'm still cutting back my hours, delegating more, making time for the things that matter. Also okay. And I want—" She pulled back, looked up at him. "I want us to look for a place together. Not right away, but eventually. Something that's ours. Mine and yours and Sophie's." Nathan's expression went soft. "You want to live with us? I want to build a home with you. A real one. Where Sophie can have her dinosaur books, and you can have your garage space, and I can have whatever it is I need. That isn't a corner office and mountain views. What do you need?" "You," Evelyn said simply. "I need you, both of you. That's what I've been trying to figure out this whole time. I don't need more success or more control or more proof that I'm enough. I just need people to come home to, people who see me and love me anyway." Nathan kissed her, and it felt like a promise and a beginning and everything Evelyn had been too scared to want. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning that felt like every other Sunday except it wasn't, Evelyn sat in a much smaller house in a much quieter neighborhood and watched Sophie teach her how to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. "You have to pour the batter slower," Sophie said with the patience of a teacher instructing a hopeless student. "Otherwise it spreads too much and you get blobs." "I like blobs," Evelyn said. "Dad likes blobs too. That's why his pancakes are terrible." Nathan looked up from his coffee. "I can hear you. I know, I'm being honest. You said honesty is important." "I did say that." Nathan caught Evelyn's eye and smiled. "But maybe next time use a gentler tone." Blah. They ate blob-shaped pancakes at the table in Evelyn's new house. Not new, but new to her. A 3-bedroom cottage she'd bought after selling the Victorian. It was small enough to feel cozy and big enough for the 3 of them when Sophie stayed over on weekends, which was increasingly often. Nathan had hired 2 full-time mechanics with the grant money and cut his hours at the shop. Evelyn had promoted her VP to COO and started working 4 days a week instead of 7. They were both learning how to have lives outside of work, how to be people instead of just their jobs. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes about money, about Sophie's schedule, about whose turn it was to do the dishes. Evelyn still struggled with wanting to control everything. Nathan still had moments where he pulled away, scared she'd leave. But they worked through it, talked instead of hiding, chose each other even when it was hard. After breakfast, they drove to the winter market, the same one where Evelyn had first met Sophie. It had become their Sunday tradition. The 3 of them wandering through the stalls, Sophie collecting pamphlets, Nathan buying books he probably shouldn't, Evelyn just being present. At the dinosaur cookie stand, Sophie picked out a Brachiosaurus and looked up at Evelyn. "Can you tell me the story again? About how you and Dad met?" Evelyn glanced at Nathan. They'd agreed to be honest with Sophie about everything, age-appropriate version. She knew Evelyn had used a different name at first, knew there had been a misunderstanding that had hurt her dad, but she also knew they'd worked through it, that sometimes people made mistakes and sometimes people forgave each other, and sometimes that was enough. "Your dad came to breakfast late," Evelyn said, "because he was taking you to your reading program, and I thought he was the kindest person I'd ever met. And then you lied to him," Sophie added matter-of-factly. "And then I lied to him, which was wrong. But then you said sorry and told the truth, and now you're together." Sophie bit into her cookie. "I like this story. It has a good ending." "It does," Nathan agreed, taking Evelyn's hand. They walked through the market as snow started to fall, light flurries that stuck to their coats and melted on their faces. Sophie ran ahead to look at the geodes. Nathan pulled Evelyn close. "You happy?" he asked. Evelyn looked around at the Sunday crowd, at the white tents and the mountains in the distance, and Sophie pointing excitedly at a purple crystal. Looked at the man beside her who taught her that love wasn't about control or testing or protecting yourself from pain. It was about showing up, about being honest, about choosing someone over and over even when it scared you. "Yeah," she said, I'm happy. And she was. Not perfectly happy. There was no such thing. Not completely certain about the future. That was impossible. But happy in this moment, with these people, building this imperfect, messy, beautiful life together. She'd started this whole thing trying to protect herself from being hurt, trying to prove that good people existed without risking anything real. But what she'd learned was that you couldn't have love without risk, couldn't have connection without vulnerability, couldn't build anything that mattered without being willing to fail at it. The test she'd designed for Nathan had really been a test for herself, and the only way to pass was to stop testing, to trust, to love without guarantees. Sophie came running back with a geode that cost more than Nathan wanted to spend, and Evelyn bought it before he could protest. Not because she was trying to buy her way in anymore, because this was what family did. They supported each other. They shared resources and responsibilities and ugly purple rocks that made 6-year-olds happy. Later that night, after they dropped Sophie off with Rachel and driven back to Evelyn's house, Nathan pulled her close on the couch that was smaller than her old one, but fit them both perfectly. "I've been thinking," he said. About what you said. About finding a place together. For the three of us." Evelyn's heart jumped. "Yeah?" "Yeah. I think I'm ready. If you are, I'm ready." Evelyn turned to face him. "I want to wake up with you every morning. Want to make terrible pancakes and fight about dishes and help Sophie with her homework. I want all of it. Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. Because the hard parts mean it's real, mean we're actually building something instead of just pretending." Nathan kissed her, and Evelyn thought about how far they'd come from that first breakfast at the Humble Spoon, how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. She was still scared sometimes, still caught herself trying to control things she couldn't control. But now she had Nathan to call her on it, had Sophie to remind her what mattered, had a family to come home to even when she failed. "I love you," Nathan said against her mouth. "I love you too." They sat there in the quiet house as snow continued to fall outside, and Evelyn understood something she'd been too stubborn to see before. Happiness wasn't something you achieved by eliminating risk. It was something you built by taking risks with the right people, by choosing vulnerability over safety, by loving someone enough to let them see all of you, even the parts you'd spent years hiding. She'd come to Aspen 8 years ago thinking she could build a perfect life through control and careful planning. And maybe she had built something perfect on paper. But it had been empty, lonely, a cage she'd constructed for herself. This life, the messy, unpredictable, beautifully imperfect life she was building with Nathan and Sophie, this was real. This was worth protecting. Not by testing it or managing it or keeping it at arm's length, but by showing up for it every single day. By spring, they'd found a house, bigger than Evelyn's cottage, smaller than her old Victorian, with a yard for Sophie and a garage for Nathan, and enough windows that Evelyn could still see the mountains. They moved in on a Saturday with Rachel's help and a moving truck that kept getting stuck in the driveway. Sophie claimed the bedroom with the best light and immediately filled it with dinosaur books. Nathan set up his tools in the garage and looked more at peace than Evelyn had ever seen him. Evelyn unpacked boxes and hung pictures and built a home that wasn't about impressing anyone or proving anything, just about being together. That night, after Sophie was asleep and the boxes were mostly unpacked and exhaustion had set in, Evelyn and Nathan sat on their back porch and looked at the stars. "We did it," Nathan said. "We did." "You have any regrets? About how we got here?" Evelyn thought about it, about the lies and the pain and all the ways she'd almost destroyed this before it had a chance to begin, about the test she'd designed and how spectacularly it had backfired. "No," she said finally, but because if I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't have learned what I needed to learn, wouldn't have understood that love isn't something you prove or test or protect yourself from. It's something you choose every day, even when it's terrifying." "Especially when it's terrifying," Nathan agreed. They sat in the dark and listened to the wind in the trees and the distant sound of Sophie talking in her sleep about Brachiosaurus migration patterns. And Evelyn thought about all the versions of herself she'd tried to be over the years. The successful CEO, the careful planner, the woman who controlled every variable. And finally, Ellie, not a disguise after all, but the truest version of herself she'd ever managed to be. The version who admitted she was scared, who took risks anyway, who loved imperfectly but completely, who chose connection over control and found out that was the only choice that mattered. "Thank you," she said to Nathan. "For what?" "For seeing me, for giving me another chance, for teaching me that being vulnerable isn't weakness." "Thank you for staying," Nathan said, "for not running when things got hard, for choosing us." And that was it, really. The lesson Evelyn had been trying to learn her whole life. You couldn't protect yourself into happiness. You couldn't test your way into trust. You could only choose to be brave, choose to be honest, choose to love without guarantees and hope it was enough. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes people hurt you and promises broke and love failed despite your best efforts. But sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave and willing to risk everything, sometimes you found someone who chose you back, who saw all your flaws and loved you anyway, who built a life with you one imperfect day at a time. Evelyn had spent years looking for proof that good people existed, and all along the real question wasn't whether they existed. It was whether she was brave enough to love one when she found him. She finally was, and that made all the difference.